Oh, I have to go fight this battle. Wish me luck. Good luck. Goodbye.
He came out of nowhere.
There'll be consequences.
We need one more.
Better stop.
One more person needs to follow. Come on.
Wait, not Nick Cage again? You have more than... Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. He created additional...
You're at 100. I see 100.
No,
needs to
no,
clip
I'm not
this
gonna
moment
count.
just
No,
to
we're
check.
not counting that because
Just
Nick
cut to
Cage
100.
can't... Did it just break dance me off of it and almost kill me? I'm pretty sure that is exactly what it just did. My ATV break danced me off of the ATV, almost killing me and destroying it in the process.
Get rid of this thing.
Oh, there's another one.
I want to get rid of that. Rah! Please leave me alone! There's still a thing! Ow, 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 ow. I gotta turn to Swiss cheese.
I've got an idea.
There I was.
Hold chat. Hold. Yep. Hold. 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 Hold it. Ow. Don't you laugh at me. Out here getting laughed at by a hamster. This is outrageous. Somebody go to Joseph and clip it. Clip it. No, don't clip it, chat. I'm taking the VOD down. Clip it. Clip it. I'm crying right now. Holy cow. All I did was hiccup. Yeah, but squeaky hiccup. The squeak. I'm being made fun of by a hamster. It was glorious. Send help, chat. It was glorious. Okay, so...
Yikes! Oh! Alright, head count. Who's still alive? Oh no. Oh no. Oh, the car is very broken. Where'd the engine go?
Why on
Oh
earth?
no, Joseph, they're voting for failure. You better be paying attention. No more burning pizza.
Okay, fine, Lord. What the heck?
Duh.
What the? This is outrageous.
1.1 liter of gas.
Well, hello, chat. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well today. Welcome in, welcome in. Chonky, congratulations on first. I wonder how he did it. It certainly can't be that he's on the same internet as me. Surely not. I have him trapped in the basement. That's why. Clearly. That being said, our plan for the day today, quite straightforward. We are going to be opening up with prayer here in a moment, so if you've got a prayer request, now is your chance. Now's the time. After that, of course, we will hop into our Bible reading. Today, our verse of the day coming from Peter, or 1 Peter 3:15. And then we're carrying on with our reading through the Bible with Psalms 1 through 4. As we continue through our guided reading through the Bible. That being said, I realized that it said in 120 days, and I think that meant I was supposed to do all 4 things that it had listed, and that was a day. So it's going to take longer than 120 days, but we will get through the full Bible. We're going to go through this. We're going to get through the Bible. But like I said, Psalms 1 through 4 will be our reading for today. Let you out? No, I don't think I will. Are you just responding to something on the side there? There we go. Allow to welcome in. I hope that you're doing well today. I'll give you all another minute or two if there are any prayer requests. Get them in now. Chonky, I already know yours. We're going to be praying for your success. But for everybody else, if you've got anyone, this is your chance. This is your opportunity. Once we're done with our Bible reading, of course, it's Monday, so we will do a Media Monday. I've got some videos queued up. And we'll play some Satisfactory while we watch our videos. Unspoken? Alright. Alright, Lao too. I believe, if I recall correctly, I saw that someone else needed a certain prayer. Let me check and see if it was something that was said in public. Oh wait, no, that's someone else. Okay. Okay. Misunderstood. Fish! How dare you fish me? How rude. I also do apologize for the delay. The new mouse has arrived, so I had to get it all set up. Hopefully, we won't see any more issues now, because I was losing my mind over the weekend. The stuttering was getting worse and worse to the point where I couldn't almost use the mouse half the time. I don't know what its qualms with me were, but it was driving me mad. So we give it just a few more seconds. Actually, no, I think we're good. I think I've given it enough time. We shall get the ball rolling then. Alright, let's get started, shall we? Heavenly Father, we come to you today, and as we do, we ask that you open our hearts and our minds, that you provide us wisdom, guidance, and discernment, that we may better understand the lessons that it is you intend for us to take from today, whether they be found here in the good word, or they be found in our day-to-day life in some interaction we have, whatever tool it is you choose to teach us with today. We just ask that you grant us the wisdom and the insight that is necessary, that we may make use of it, that we may grow as Christians. We ask that you continue to provide a refuge for us, a place where we can gather with our fellow Christians in your might, where we can refresh and renew ourselves. We live in a world full of temptations, tragedies, and enemies all about us, that we see us torn down and led astray to be led away from you. And we just ask that you grant us the strength that is necessary to overcome each and every one of them today, that we may continue our walk alongside you. We ask that you lay your healing hands on each and every one of us. You know our personal struggles, whether we have admitted them out loud or not. You know our needs better than we do. You know our heart. You know what it is that we need most in this world, and we just ask that you grant us those needs today. In particular, we lift up Chonky, that he has great success in his interviews and his job hunting, and that he should get employed quickly and begin building up his life. We have our unspoken prayer for Lao Tu. You know what's going on. You know what's needed, Lord. We just ask that you grant those needs and those mercies today. But above all, we ask for your mercy and for your forgiveness, for we are not but sinners and fools, each and every one of us, and that your will be done in our lives. In your heavenly name we pray. Amen. Alrighty, I was going crazy. I was going a little crazy. It was driving me nuts. It's irritating to have something fail like that, especially because I haven't had that particular mouse for that long, if I recall correctly. It couldn't have been more than a year. And I'm not, like, particularly hard on my equipment most of the time, outside of maybe my poor desk. It has taken a couple of hits, but that's just part and parcel, especially whenever I was playing War Thunder. Man, that game. Oy. But, alright, for our verse of the day today, 1 Peter 3:15 from the King James Version of the Bible. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear. I need to work on that one. I need to work on that verse. I don't always live up to that. We're supposed to have an answer ready, but then again, a lot of the time the people that are asking us nowadays are not asking out of genuine curiosity. They're asking because they are looking for a gotcha. They're looking to own you, to flex on you so that they can earn points on Reddit. And it is terribly unfortunate. They don't actually want to learn. They don't care. They're just there to attack you. But they will dress it in a way that makes it look as though they are reasonable. Varkon, welcome in. But I'm also making excuses. I need to be better about having a answer ready. Chonky, if you could give Varkon a shout out. We will we'll carry on with the reading since we're in between the verses. After the shout out is said and done, because it should play a clip. But Varkon, welcome in. How are you doing today, my friend? I hope that you are well. Okay, I will shout him out. Super busy today? Fair enough. Fair enough. There it goes. I was wondering where it was.
Been a while since someone played a skill. Kind of lost.
Flares, recharging.
Thanks, of course, my friend, of course. You'll be lurking? Alright. You go lurk and deal with your things and whatnot. We will be here. Alright, though, now for our reading, which is Psalms 1 through 4 for today. So, you'll figure out this PC. My man, it's literally type !SO and then the name. This fella. Goodness gracious. But alright. So, getting into Psalms. Psalms 1. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruits in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff, which the wind driveth away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the way of judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Why do the heathen rage, and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder, and cast away their cords from us. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh. The Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall we speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen for thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings. Be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way. When his wrath is kindled but a little, blessed are all they that put their trust in him. Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, There is no help for him in God, Selah. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter of mine head. I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill, Selah. I laid me down and slept. I awaked, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people that have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people, Selah. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. Have mercy upon me, and hear my prayer. O ye sons of man, how long will ye turn my glory into shame? How long will ye love vanity, and seek after leasing, Selah? But know that the Lord hath set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Stand in awe, and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed, and be still, Selah. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness, and put your trust in the Lord. There be many that say, Who will shew us any good? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Thou hast put gladness in my heart, more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Indeed. Alright, and next time we will be reading through Matthew 1 and 3. That would be tomorrow. Today's didn't take quite as long as we started off with the long haul yesterday with going through the book of Genesis, going through the reading of that bit. That was a slow but steady process that had to be done there. Alright, let's see. There it is, Satisfactory. Get our game set up. Let me... get our category changed.
Construction projects don't come much bigger than this. HS2 is a new high-speed railway being built right up the heart of Britain, with the promise of economic growth, low carbon travel, more capacity, and some of the fastest trains on Earth.
High Speed 2 is one of the world's biggest infrastructure projects. It'll start right here in the heart of London and run across through and under England's countryside to the Midlands and one day beyond. But building it is far from easy.
The project has gone several times over budget and faced delays and staunch opposition. It's now known more for its setbacks and the decisions of those in power than its benefits or the incredible engineering that's going on. An idea to bring a country closer together has become divisive.
HS2 will generate
skills
and economic growth.
It is just a waste of money, a terrible waste of taxpayers' money.
Which means...
And that's not just a UK issue. We're seeing this everywhere. When public money is involved, the stakes get much higher, the scrutiny gets more intense. And when things go wrong, it can become
we still have to finish the platform,
impossible to stop. So how much say do we really have over the massive projects like High Speed 2 built with our money? Can our government ever stop once they've started? And does there come a point with these projects where they're just no longer?
We can now travel over land at the rate of 30 miles an hour. Think of it, ladies and gentlemen. 30 miles an hour. Euston. Departure point for 175 trains every day.
We need to build new railway lines in our country. We haven't built a line north of London for 120 years.
It will redefine the way we travel around our country. I'm absolutely convinced.
Finally giving the home of the railways the fast connections they need. And none of that, none of it makes any sense without HS2.
The way that UK government makes decisions with ebb and flow depending on the political weather, that's not how you deliver major infrastructure.
We're in a climate emergency. We need to be doing sustainable creation, not destroying the country. This project is absolute madness.
In the whole size of HS2, the only thing to do is keep digging.
HS2 will
Audio sounds good to you.
Lots of benefits. There's no question about that. But the question is whether it's worth the costs.
Like many countries, the UK
it's
is
weird
divided.
getting used
there are
to
big economic
having
and social
a
differences
mouse
between the
that's
capital
based
and
off
the rest
of
of the
my
country,
hand movement rather than
and there's little sign of anything changing.
It's not a ball
Back
mouse
in
like
2009, the government proposed a new high-speed railway to better connect London and the north of England, spreading wealth up the country. 3 years later, that project was approved and billions of taxpayer cash was set aside for it. It's called High Speed 2, which is often shortened to HS2, and it's being built in 3 stages. Phase 1 runs from London to Birmingham, Phase 2A will carry the route to a town called Crewe, and 2B takes it to Manchester and originally Leeds. High-speed trains would then continue on to other parts of the country at normal speeds, using the existing network, so those living in the wider north and Scotland can benefit too. The trains will have a top speed of 225 miles an hour, the fastest in Europe. Now, to do that, they need a track that's as straight and flat as possible, but drawing a straight flat line up England isn't easy. Some 90% of the Phase 1 route will be up on bridges and viaducts, or dug below ground in tunnels and cuttings, making it an immense feat of engineering. A journey north from London will begin here, in a new 3-storey terminal at Euston. It'll have the UK's longest concourse, a prefabricated geometric roof, and 10 platforms built some 8 metres below ground.
This site down here at Euston is where that massive new terminal is going to start to rise in the years to come. Now, it might not look like much right now, but just getting to this stage has been tough going, and the team has faced all the kind of challenges you might expect to face when clearing a site like this in the heart of a major city. Existing buildings, neighbouring properties, traffic, services, and of course the current live railway running into Euston alongside.
Hello, Thrax.
After
Welcome
Euston,
in, my friend.
trains will arrive at Old Oak Common, where
Loud
there'll be additional
to
links
thank
to
you for the
Heathrow
alert,
Airport,
my friend.
Wales, and the South West. The first landmark outside London is the Colne Valley Viaduct.
All
It'll
right,
run for
have a good night.
3.4
I hope
kilometres
that you
across
rest
several
well.
waterways and become the country's longest railway crossing. Next up is the 16-kilometre Chiltern Tunnel, the longest and deepest on the entire route, sitting up to 90 metres underground. Then it's another tunnel, but this one is less about length and depth and more about what's above it. The UK has over 300,000 hectares of ancient woodland. That's trees that have been around since 1600. Despite weathering the ages, some of those trees now find themselves in the path of HS2. Instead of cutting them all down, planners have tried to limit their destruction, and one way is to go underneath them, like up here at Long Itchington Wood.
This is one of HS2's new tunnels, and just behind me back there is where construction teams are working away to dig this route deep beneath England's countryside. Now, when you're down here, you can't help but be blown away by the scale of the engineering that's going into this project. In years to come, people on trains are going to pass through here in a matter of seconds. They'll be drinking a coffee, doing some emails, and they probably won't even notice.
But to make that leisurely experience possible, construction teams are putting in the grind, using 2,000-ton tunnel boring machines like this to cut a path. The machines feature a cutting head at the front and a system that quickly takes soil back up to the surface in these pipes along the sides of the tunnel.
This is the very front of one of HS2's tunnel boring machines. Just ahead of me up there is a massive cutting head that's steadily eating its way through the soil by about 20 to 24 metres a day. Slowly but surely, this machine is building part of HS2.
The Long Itchington Tunnel will run for 1.6 kilometres and be the first to complete across the whole route when it finishes in 2023.
It's just one example of the massive feats of engineering that are taking place between London and the Midlands to enable this high-speed line to run. In time, those incredibly fast trains are going to run across the ground I'm currently standing on, through this cutting, and on towards Birmingham.
The last stop before Birmingham is the
It's funny, I'm
Solihull interchange,
unintentionally
currently
just
built as the
burying
world's
this whole
most
area
eco-friendly
essentially
railway
underneath the
station,
platform.
with connections to the airport and the exhibition centre. Phase 1
But
then
as far as I'm aware, there's not
culminates at
really
Birmingham
anything of
Curzon Street.
value
It's the first
to me down
intercity
here.
rail terminus built in the UK since the 1800s.
But it is quite
and
funny.
it'll feature an arched roof
I've just kind of
inspired
decided,
by the
nah, we'll
railway
make this all
pioneers of that
underground.
era.
Not a big deal.
It's
There is
all
a
a lot of
ton
work and money to connect London and the Midlands, but there's a payoff. Economic growth.
The idea is that the billions being poured into this project will be paid back, and that millions of people will have their quality of life improved. High-speed rail effectively brings major cities and population centres closer together. Businesses can access larger customer bases, supply chains and labour pools. Integration and trade are improved, productivity goes up, and commuting longer distances becomes possible. You no longer have to buy a house in an expensive region in order to work there, and that takes pressure off the housing crisis. HS2 will slash journey times. Getting from London to Birmingham will take just 45 minutes, 37 minutes quicker than today.
I feel like we
But
might have
the
actually
connectivity
already
between
watched this
regions
video,
is about
haven't
more
we?
than just speed. There's another key word
It's
in
sounding
this:
familiar.
capacity. If you take a look at the UK's rail map, you might question whether this project makes any sense. London already has a direct connection to Birmingham and Manchester
we have
by the
seen
West
this one,
Coast
haven't
Main
we?
Line.
I
So
wonder why this one wasn't
build
marked
another?
as already having been
Well,
launched.
because it's one of the busiest railways.
This is Station Nord in Greenland. It's a Danish base, as the territory is part
Wish the
of the
government
Kingdom
would
of
build more
Denmark,
trains.
and therefore the
Same.
European country
I
is
wish we could
responsible
invest
for its
into train
defense.
infrastructure.
Station Nord ranks as the northernmost Danish base and the second northernmost continuously inhabited place on Earth. Therefore, the job of the 6 soldiers stationed there is largely just to keep it inhabitable. Militarily, it doesn't have tremendous purpose beyond existing. The Danes say to search their sovereignty in the vast emptiness of northern Greenland. Perhaps the 6,000-foot gravel runway is of some strategic value, but really it's a research camp that happens to be run by the Danish military.
High-speed
All summer
rail, my
long, it sees a
beloved,
non-stop rota of scientists. It's a similar story down in Mestersvik. This is an old base that at this point is pretty much just maintained and is occasionally used for scientific purposes. Perhaps the best known of Denmark's Arctic installations is Danborg. That's because it's the base of the country's primary military capabilities in the region, dog sled patrols. This function originated in World War II when Nazi forces were hiding weather stations in eastern Greenland in order to improve the accuracy of their forecasts in support of their military pursuits, and still to this day, the dog sleds are the Danish military's primary means of patrolling almost 10,000 miles of coastline. Teams of 2 set out for multi-month missions, hopping between resupply huts refilled by boat and aircraft during the summer months, and taking years to complete one full patrol of the coast. But dog sled patrol, of course, does little beyond assert sovereignty. Aside from that, there's technically a small Danish installation at Kangerlussuaq Airport, as it's home to the one and only Danish military aircraft permanently stationed in Greenland, a Bombardier CL-604 Challenger surveillance aircraft. But that's pretty much the entirety of Danish military presence north of the Arctic Circle. A couple of bases, staffed by a couple dozen personnel, and some dogs. This military geography, or lack thereof, forms part of the basis for the most recent proposal for the US to just outright purchase Greenland. Denmark is a NATO member, and therefore some military leaders in the US are concerned about such a lack of defense capability in such a large region so close to the US. Of course, the proposal appears preposterous at first. Large land purchases by one country from another have not meaningfully happened since the era of colonialism, and the very appeal of the idea is rooted in the same manner of exploitation of a territory's resources, be them human or natural. Greenland, however, is in a unique situation. It's not quite like Canada or Mexico or the Panama Canal or the Gaza Strip or any of the other slices of Earth American President Trump has proposed annexing. Greenland acts as an autonomous, self-governing territory of the Kingdom of Denmark.
Sir, I'm trying
it's
to work
similar
here.
to the relationship between Scotland and the UK, for example. Culturally, politically, and geographically, it's almost entirely isolated from Denmark, but less so economically. Denmark pays for about 2/3 of Greenland's government budget, and its contributions add up to about 1/4 of the territory's GDP. Meanwhile, Greenland pays no taxes to Denmark. It's a one-way flow of money. Therefore, looking at it at the simplest possible level, excluding politics, culture, history, any of the practical concerns, or the way people actually feel in reality right now, it's easy to grasp a scenario where all parties come out happy. The US gets the territory it wants, Greenland gets a greater cash inflow in exchange, and Denmark stops having to send hundreds of millions of dollars a year to a far-off territory. But considering the core of the purported value is wrapped up in the strategic benefit for the military, examining the need requires an understanding of the military geography across the entire far north. And here, nestled on the coast of North Star Bay, is the simplest explanation for how Denmark can have such a minor presence in its massive territory. This is the United States' largest Arctic installation, Pituffik Space Base. Compared to the Danish equivalents, this is colossal. It's got a 10,000-foot, 3,000-meter runway, it's staffed by about 600 personnel, it's got the world's northernmost deepwater port. It's really a fully equipped US military base like those that dot the entire world, just really, really far north. Its location makes it a 3 to 4 hour flight to all of Russia's northern coast, or just over 5 hours to Moscow. Given this proximity, the base's population peaked at more than 10,000 during the height of tensions with the Soviet Union in the 60s. Today, its role centers around missile tracking, signals intelligence, and satellite communications, although it regularly hosts fighter jets and other offensive aircraft to train for their operations in the environment should the need arise in a conflict. Pituffik, however, is an anomaly. It is by far the largest military facility west of the Prime Meridian and north of the Arctic Circle. Its next nearest neighboring facility is Canadian Forces Station Alert, an hour's flight to the north. Not much detail is publicly known about what, specifically, the station does, but broadly it's a joint Canadian-American signals intelligence facility taking advantage of the location for surveillance and monitoring of whatever NATO, the US, or Canada deems a threat. Physically, it's closer to Moscow than it is to Ottawa, which historically allowed for greater surveillance capabilities on the Soviet Union, and today allows the same with Russia. It's so far north, in fact, that the curvature of the Earth prevents it from having a line of sight with communication satellites in geosynchronous orbit around the equator. Therefore, the Canadians built a network of microwave repeaters on mountaintops across Ellesmere Island that each have line of sight with each other, allowing transmissions to reach satellites via Eureka, a small combo research military base that is just far enough south to see the satellites.
There's also a Canadian military presence down on Baffin Island at the Novosivik Naval Facility, which is on the cusp of opening following more than a decade of construction delays. Its purpose is pretty simple. It's home to 2 big storage tanks to refuel Canadian naval vessels, allowing them to patrol longer and further into the Arctic, which is something the military is keen to do as sea ice shrinks and the waterways become navigable for more weeks each year. Beyond that, there's a training facility in Resolute Bay, and as far as major permanent Canadian military facilities in the Arctic go, that's about it. To the west, one might expect that the most militarized country on Earth would also have the most militarized Arctic territory, but that's far from the case. In fact, the only permanent American facilities north of the Arctic Circle in Alaska are long-range radar sites used by NORAD for early detection of missiles, aircraft, and other potential threats, although these days they are primarily run by civilian contractors who fly in and out of the attached airfields to do work. Most are not staffed full-time, particularly by enlisted service members. Just south of the Arctic Circle, though, is a far more significant presence. Clustered primarily around Fairbanks is a series of bases with the full gamut of US military capabilities. There's the largest concentration of 5th-generation fighter jets in the world, the core of the US's anti-ballistic missile defense system, 20,000 active duty troops. It's a massive cluster of might, but it's historically been optimized less for projecting power to the north, but more so to protect from eastbound threats from Russia, North Korea, China, and other Asian nations, considering it's on the Great Circle path between the 2 continents. Russia's Arctic posture, however, is quite different. Tracking westward, it starts modest. The country's easternmost facility of any significance is referred to as Polar Star. Coincidentally, it was built in a town that was originally established to assert Russian sovereignty on the islands as the Americans and Canadians attempted to claim it a century ago. That town sat empty after the last resident was killed by a polar bear in 2003, but in its place, the Russian military built this small base. It's only accessible by helicopter and boat, and little is known about what happens there beyond the operations of this radar facility and the associated anti-aircraft missile systems. But without an airfield, it has little offensive capability. That's why, a 2-hour flight to the west, they're building this, Temp Air Base. This outpost has existed since the 50s, and like most of the country's military facilities in the Arctic, it closed following the collapse of the Soviet Union. But then, over the past decade, it's not only reopened, but has been built up into a hugely capable facility. The latest high-quality satellite imagery doesn't even show it, but what was a gravel airstrip has since been upgraded into a 6,900-foot, 2,100-meter paved runway capable of accommodating most military aircraft year-round. The corresponding base is massive compared to most equivalents at this latitude, housing around 250 personnel. And that's not even the country's most capable Arctic base. To the west, there's Russia's northernmost, Nagerskoye base, which also, since this imagery was taken, paved this runway and expanded it to 11,500 feet or 3,500 meters, allowing it to host truly any aircraft, including fighter jets. In fact, in 2021, Russia flew 2 fighter jets from the base to the North Pole as a show of force. The growing capability of this base, paired with its geography, has rattled the West. Nagerskoye is less than a 3-hour flight to Pacific Space Base, and it's also the closest Russian airbase to Washington, D.C. Nagerskoye is backed up by Rogachevo Air Base, a 90-minute flight to the south, and then there are a few more minor facilities scattered along the country's northern coast. There's also a huge concentration of military might on the Kola Peninsula, bordering Norway and Finland, although NATO also has a significant buildup in this region. It's, in part, a byproduct of the fact that this is the most hospitable and populated region of the Arctic, thanks to the comparatively warm air brought in by the Gulf Stream. But throughout the rest of the Arctic, the distribution of facilities tells a pretty succinct story. Russia has been far more concerned than pretty much any country in building up its military presence in the far north. Of course, docile maps aren't what truly matters militarily. They're a proxy for capability, and capability is what matters in conflict. But there too, Russia appears to have the upper hand.
Beyond its bases, the primary manner in which the US is able to bring military capability to anywhere is through its naval resources. It has one of the largest and almost certainly most powerful navies in the world, and between cruisers, destroyers, aircraft carriers, and more, it's capable of bringing a huge amount of force truly anywhere, except the Arctic. Submarines can operate in the Arctic year-round since they float beneath the ice, but beyond that, no other US ships have hardened hulls capable of cutting through sea ice. That means that, for the majority of the year, the Arctic is the one area of the world to which the US can't project power by sea. Of course, the solution to this is icebreakers. They not only can access frozen areas themselves, but they can cut a channel for other ships that lack hardened hulls. The US has 3 of these, all operated by the US Coast Guard. Russia, meanwhile, has 41 of them. This includes a series of brand new nuclear-powered icebreakers that are more powerful and longer-ranged than any other in the world. And this imbalance exists across just about every military capability in the Arctic. Whatever the US has, Russia has more of. They have more training, more equipment designed for the extreme cold, more snow-capable vehicles, more ports, more airfields. Their GPS alternative navigation system, GLONASS, even has more satellites reaching higher latitudes, giving it better coverage in the polar regions. And all of these capabilities, especially in the period leading up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, have been growing faster than at any time since the Cold War. It's become a cliche over the last decade to call the renewed interest in the far north as a race for the Arctic. But ever since 2007, when an emboldened Russia planted its flag underwater on the North Pole, it's been hard to think of it as anything less. And it's been hard to think of any nation aside from Russia as the current leader in that race. In just about all metrics, Russia's leading the way. But while Russia's actions have encouraged a response by the rest of the world to hurriedly catch up, Russia, for its part, has viewed its northern activity as less an exceptional push into an underdeveloped corner of the map, and more a natural progression as part of a larger, cohesive defense strategy. This all centers around the Kola Peninsula. In the past decade, Russia has heavily reinvested in this region by modernizing the Severomorsk air bases and upgrading the Okolnaya and Gadzhievo submarine bases. Critically, though, this is reinvestment. Historically, the facilities along this peninsula were central to Soviet defense, and as Russia's relations with the West have gotten colder while its ambitions have grown larger, they're viewing the region's defense capabilities as vitally important once again. As analysts have noted, this investment has little to do with any sort of race to the Arctic or the Arctic itself, and more to do with a return to a strategy called bastion defense. Effectively, the country wants to create an air and sea buffer between itself and other nations that ensures freedom of movement across the Barents and Norwegian seas for its northern fleet, along with its increasingly important northern natural gas industry. What makes this particular bastion so critical for Russian defense is the fact that this area harbors what's believed to be about 2/3 of Russia's nuclear strike capabilities in its ballistic missile submarines, which operate as a key nuclear deterrent and the nation's second strike capabilities should it be attacked. So, while at the periphery of the world from most's perspective, this area is already central to Russian defense, which means increased traffic creates an increasingly paranoid Russia. The invasion of Ukraine has only added to the paranoia. For one, Russia's invasion has shaken up the map of the High North, pushing the long neutral neighbors in Finland and Sweden to join NATO, making the High North a 7-1 split between NATO and non-NATO nations. While a repercussion of their own actions, this has only served to further the sense of encirclement for Russian military planners. And making Russia more concerned is the fact that it was the Northern Fleet's ground resources that led the invasion into Ukraine in the first place. In late January and early February of 2022, when Russian onlookers began to share on social media trainload after trainload moving tanks and army trucks south, it was resources being mobilized from the Arctic that they were capturing. In the weeks that followed, those resources, much of the 200th Brigade, were dramatically beaten back, then bogged down on the outskirts of Kharkiv, ensuring there'd be no quick return. While exact numbers are difficult to come by, only an estimated 1/5 of the 200th Brigade has remained stationed on the Kola Peninsula, while the failed attempt to seize Kharkiv decimated the fleet's ground forces. At the same time that Russia has moved troops away from the High North has also become more economically central to the country. Total trade across the North Sea route hit an all-time high in 2022, while new LNG terminals above the Arctic Circle went online, using the North Sea route to move product to China. And with the subsequent sanctions that came with invasion, Russia has diverted traffic of crude oil bound for Asia through the Arctic, while reportedly beginning to build a ghost fleet of tankers that have been quietly tracking across the region to avoid sanctions entirely. Taken together, what's long been understood from a Russian perspective as a military stronghold has become increasingly important economically, increasingly hostile militarily, and increasingly vulnerable. Feeling cornered, the nation has taken to lashing out with aggressive military maneuvers, joint military exercises with China, and going as far as destroying infrastructure like undersea cables. Much of the sensationalism of the increasing military importance of the Arctic, then, can be explained by the collision of two very different geopolitical narratives. In the West, the US and its allies in NATO are dramatically falling behind Russia in Arctic capabilities, so it must rush to catch up. In Russia, it seems the rest of the world is pushing to encircle and endanger its northern coast, an area strategically important for its defense and its economy, so it must dig
Wasabi,
in.
congratulations
But both these
on
competing
second.
narratives run into a stark reality
Welcome
of
in.
which Greenland sits directly in the middle. There's just not a lot of actual infrastructure, military, civilian, or otherwise, in the upper reaches
And
of the
take
Arctic.
care of myself.
All
Alright.
real American and Russian might hovers around the very edge of the Arctic Circle, while the island and its military personnel numbered in hundreds,
Right back.
from a strategic perspective, represents largely a blank space on the map. China, for one, has come knocking. With a reversal of a rare earth elements mining ban in 2013 by Greenland's parliament, the island's rich natural resources caught the eye of investors. Chinese firms seeking to back uranium mining in the island's south, zinc mining in the island's north, and oil field production off its coast had all begun doing their due diligence on how to open up shop. In 2025, the Ten Breeze mine in southern Greenland, optimistically projected to produce over half of the global non-Chinese rare earth elements, went up for sale and garnered heavy Chinese interest. Only heavy American and Danish lobbying in early 2025 pushed the sale to an American firm for reportedly a fraction of market value. In each case of Chinese mining interest, the fear of the nation's increased influence in the region has pushed the projects back. But these increasingly accessible rare earth elements are bound to keep international firms coming back. It stands to reason, given the demand and the potential economic windfall for the island, that it's only a matter of time before a foreign mining company gets a real foothold. And still, the commercial appeal is dwarfed by the strategic and defense appeal. There's just really no landmass as centrally located to the high Arctic as Greenland, and no place that so cleanly splits the divide between east and west, nor sits so near to critical seaways that serve as entrance and exit to the high north. Seemingly so far beyond the purview of Denmark's focus, for the emboldened, it feels up for grabs. Given Denmark's self-admitted lack of defense investment in the island, the US's increasingly bad faith dealing with the rest of the world, and the vamping narrative tension in the Arctic, the future of Greenland can be presented as a rhetorical this or that. If not America, then who? But Greenland is not empty. Its people do have a say, NATO is not just an empty vassal for the US to control, and Denmark, though behind, is not asleep at the wheel. In response to President Trump's rhetoric, Greenland's Prime Minister has held talks with European leaders about maintaining its semi-autonomous standing, NATO countries have talked about deploying troops to Greenland, and Denmark's announced $2 billion in increased defense spending for the island. The capability gap in the Arctic is real. It's clear that, for a US military so accustomed to unequivocal superiority, the imbalance in infrastructure and experience is uncomfortable. What's less clear is how sovereign control of Greenland would help that. The US already has a major military presence in the territory, and there's never been a major impediment to operations or expansions at Patuxent Space Base due to the lack of sovereignty. In fact, over recent years, the US has announced plans to upgrade and expand the facility, and while Danish and Greenlandic authorities didn't immediately agree, a short negotiation with a few concessions led to rather swift approval. Outside of Greenland, other NATO members like Canada also recognize the gaps in the alliance's Arctic footprint, so they are already spending huge sums to upgrade their facilities and capabilities. Surely they would be happy for the US to spend those huge sums in their territory instead. To military leaders, the status quo is untenable, but considering how minuscule the US's Arctic capabilities are, there's enormous ability to expand before it becomes necessary to just buy Greenland. Rather than do a normal ad read here, I just want to play the trailer to the newest show produced by Wendover Productions. It's called Abolish Everything.
Do you ever feel like we'd all be better off if everyone liked stuff less and yelled at each other more?
You're holding the door open on the train?
Deep underground in New York City, a radical movement is taking shape, and I'd like you to join us.
Each night, gathered in our meeting house, 4 brave abolitionists will tell us why we should eliminate some aspect of society forever.
Abolish the dentist!
Speakerphone!
Bombs.
Beeps!
Stretching! Yeah, bring it on! And their testimony will be heard and rebutted by the political establishment, a panel of improvisers hell-bent on preserving the status quo.
The boys want to see ya, don't want to hear ya. So why do you hate what God gave to you?
Have you ever taken a lot of Adderall for your body?
The only way to stop a bad guy with a speakerphone is a good guy with a speakerphone.
At the end of the show, the people will decide what gets abolished, who gets this cartoonish sack of coins with a $sign on it, and who receives an invitation to our World Championship season finale. Stand-up, improv, PowerPoint presentations. If our movement is successful, all of these things will eventually be banned. This is Abolish Everything!
Of course they're in NYC, yeah.
The first episode of Abolish Everything is already out, and more are coming out every 2 weeks exclusively on Nebula, and a lot of people seem to be really enjoying it. It's obviously pretty different from what we've made in the past, but I think it's the kind of comedy that will appeal especially to Wendover fans, as comedians make rather ridiculous PowerPoint presentations loosely grounded in reality to pitch their case to the political establishment. If you want to watch this, or any of Nebula's great, unique Nebula originals, use the link nebula.tv/Wendover to get 40% off an annual subscription.
The images you are seeing right now have been a closely guarded secret for years. This is the first time footage of this technology has been shared publicly. A technology that has the potential to change the course of human history. A privilege Helion Energy granted us when we visited their facility. What I am sharing right now is going to be studied by nuclear physicists around the world, trying to reverse engineer the world-changing machine. This is Trenta, Helion's 6th generation nuclear fusion generator. This fusion generator is unlike any other, using a completely novel approach to achieve nuclear fusion, adapting knowledge developed for ion propulsion in space. The generator forms 2 mirrored rings of plasma on either end of a reactor, and in a 1/10 of a thousandth of a second, they fire them at each other, sequentially activating powerful magnets to squeeze and compress the rings towards the center, where they collide, converting the astonishing kinetic energy of the ions, traveling at 300 kilometers per second, into thermal energy, raising the plasma temperature to tens of millions of degrees, hot enough to overcome the electromagnetic repulsion keeping the ions apart, and allowing them to fuse, forming new atoms and releasing a tremendous amount of energy in the process. This isn't the world of fairy tale. This is already happening. I watched the bright pink flash of fusion multiple times inside the control room of Trenta, safe away from the gigawatts of power surging through the capacitor banks of the reactor. It became mundane pretty quickly, to the point that my reaction to the feat became oddly subdued.
Please, I beg of you, make my dreams come true.
But make no mistake, what Helion has achieved here is astonishing, initiating nuclear fusion reactions with ease. So let's jump into it with Helion's brilliant founder, David Kirtley, giving us the world's first tour of Trenta.
So yeah.
Welcome to Helion.
So yeah, can you just start explaining what this machine is?
Yes, so you're at Helion's Redmond facility. Here we're standing in front of our 6th generation machine. We call this one Trenta.
Not only
this is
will
the
it
6th
make
generation of machines that
a
form,
difference,
merge,
like,
and
in terms of
compress fusion plasmas.
the amount of energy that we can produce here on Earth.
Like we're looking at
but
this end of the machine, but
That
it's mirrored on
is
that
going
end.
to be the key.
Can you explain
to
like
us
why you
going
do the pulse reaction
and doing
towards each
interstellar
other?
travel.
Yeah,
like
it's a
an
great
ocean
question.
It's one of the biggest
The
things
fundamental
that we need.
concept of how these systems work is unlike most fusion. In here, we inject a fusion target. We call this one a field reverse configuration. Then using pulsed magnetic fields to very high pressures, we compress that fusion plasma up to fusion conditions. One of the challenging parts is how do you get that target, that initial fusion fuel, into the compression chamber and do it in a repeatable, symmetric, high energy way. And so one of the things that we pioneered was a concept of merging field reverse configurations, merging these plasmas, where we actually have a symmetry on either side of the machine. We have these injectors, we call them the formation section, where we actually form this initial plasma. We inject the fusion fuel. We then accelerate them, merge them in the center region, where they take all that kinetic energy that we put into them when we accelerated them, and they stop. They stagnate, converting that kinetic energy into temperature, into thermal energy, and that starts the fusion reaction. We then can compress it all the way up to the full fusion conditions.
Okay. And the actual plasma generation happens on this end, right?
The plasma generation happens right here, interestingly enough. So over here, we're standing in front of what is called the diverter. This is what happens after the reaction. Here is our formation section. Here is where we initially inject our neutral gas. So the gas is ejected from a flow manifold, a fuel manifold here, where we puff in gas in a neutral gas that's just at room temperature. This gas fills this chamber over the course of several thousandths of a second. At this point, it's room temperature, it's very low pressure, a fusion fuel mix of deuterium and helium-3. We then ionize that gas. What that means is we start to heat that with a combination of RF and electric fields, which then take the electrons that are orbiting the nucleus and tears them off of the nucleus, forming a plasma, charged particles, positive and negative charges in this area. We then form what is called a field reverse configuration, where what we do is we take magnetic field that's keeping this plasma. This part, it's ionized. It's, for us, relatively cool. It's about 1,000,000 degrees. But that's still so hot that it can't touch any of the walls without damaging materials. So to prevent that, we have magnetic fields that thread through this entire machine, keeping that hot fuel, that hot fusion fuel plasma off of the walls. But what we do here, which is quite unique, is that we then take that initial magnetic field and by pulsing at very high intensity, over 100,000 amps per coil, we then reverse that magnetic field, trapping magnetic energy in a closed field. This is called a self-confined, self-organized plasma. It's a really unique version of fusion fuel that Helion and very few others do. But what that enables us to do is form a closed magnetic topology, a closed plasma object that we can do things to, we can actually do work on. And so at that point, we now have a closed field reverse configuration in this formation section. We then start to pulse these magnetic field coils at high pressure, sequencing them. And they get sequenced as we go down. We call that peristaltic acceleration, like squeezing a tube of toothpaste. It accelerates that plasma out of the formation section, which had all the complex ionization, gas injection, and all those things, into higher field section. At this point, we've now moved into what we call the acceleration section, or the plasma injector, where literally here, we are now continuing to accelerate this plasma to over 1,000,000 miles an hour, 300 kilometers a second and higher, down the length of the system. But as we do that, we start to compress it already. So as we increase the magnetic field through adiabatic compression, ideal gas law, as you increase the magnetic pressure, the plasma then compresses, decreasing in radius, but increasing in pressure and temperature. So as it's left the formation, it's on the order of several million degrees. But now we start to compress it. We start to accelerate it. And if we've done everything right and sequenced these in just the right way, this plasma field reverse configuration has now accelerated all the way to 300 kilometers a second. It's heated to on the order of 10 million degrees. And then we inject it into the main compression section. You notice here, the bolts, the pressure, everything goes up, because here's where we really do the fusion. If we've done everything right, this FRC, that we've injected into the main compression section, has met its mate that we made symmetrically on the other side. And what they do is those two collide. Those two plasmas collide, and here's the really important part, they stop. They stagnate, they take all that kinetic energy we added, all that velocity, and we turn that into thermal energy. It superheats up, and if you've done everything right, in the middle of this, you have a system that's on the order of 10 to 20 million degrees. sitting in this main compression section, ready to do fusion. So now you rapidly, as fast as modern technology will allow, we increase the magnetic field to high pressure, compressing that fusion plasma all the way up to fusion conditions over 100 million degrees. Fusion begins, large amount of fusion is happening. Inside this core compressed FRC now,
what have you started?
This core compressed fusion fuel, the fusion reactions start to occur. Those fusion reactions are creating new particles. Deuterium fusing together with helium-3 to form helium-4 and an extra hydrogen. And both of those two particles are very high temperature now. They're born inside the fusion plasma, applying pressure back on these magnetic fields. That works just like in a piston, where in a piston you compress the fusion, you compress the fuel, it begins to burn, it then gets hotter,
reading that
it pushes
hurts
back
me.
on that piston, only we do it all electromagnetically.
This is a truly innovative concept. With tokamak reactors, like the massive ITER reactor being built in France right now, electricity is created by converting the kinetic energy of neutrons expelled during fusion to heat by slowing them down in the blanket walls. This heat is then transferred to high-pressure water to create high-pressure steam, which turns a turbine attached to an electric generator that rapidly rotates a magnetic field around copper wires to generate an electric current. Helion is skipping steps 1 through 4 and going straight to moving a magnetic field around copper wires, generating electricity directly from the magnetic field, cradling the fusion reaction at the center of the machine. As the fusion reaction occurs, the energy it generates begins to push back on the magnetic field, confining it, moving it, as David said, like a piston. It's this changing magnetic field that will generate Helion's electricity. Skipping all the initial steps needed to boil water and turn a turbine should, in theory, make it vastly more efficient, while also unlocking the major benefits of a superior nuclear fusion fuel mixture. One of the problems with tokamak reactors is their choice of fuels. The fuel mixture of choice for tokamaks is deuterium and tritium. The availability of deuterium is not a problem. It's everywhere. This is a bottle of heavy water. Water with 2 deuterium atoms instead of 2 regular hydrogen atoms. It's cheap and safe. I can even drink it. However, tritium, as we spoke about in more detail in our last video, is extremely rare. We only have about 20 kilograms of it in global reserves, and a single commercial-scale tokamak is expected to burn through 300 grams of it a day, giving us about 2 months of operation with the world's entire current supply. Tokamak generators will manufacture tritium on site using a lithium breeding layer. When the high-energy neutrons from our nuclear fusion reaction collide with the lithium in the reactor wall, the lithium splits into tritium and helium. This is a reasonable solution, but 80% of the energy of the tritium-deuterium fusion reaction is carried by those high-energy neutrons. So, we have effectively wasted all of our energy to get back to square one. To combat this, the first layer of tokamak walls will be made of beryllium, a neutron multiplier, which creates 2 neutrons when struck by 1 neutron, giving us 1 neutron to create tritium and 1 neutron to generate heat. However, beryllium is extremely expensive. The entire annual global supply is just enough to build a single tokamak generator. Beryllium also contains uranium impurities, which will be encountering the high-energy neutrons too, making the beryllium blanket dangerously radioactive over time, which will make disposing of it expensive. This all points to one massive problem. Tokamak reactors are going to face the exact same issues as nuclear fission energy. They will be too expensive and won't be able to compete with cheaper forms of electricity. This is why Helion is using a completely different fuel mixture.
So Helion's approach to fusion uses a deuterium and a helium-3 fuel. Deuterium is really common. It's 1 part in 500 in all water, the coffee you drink.
No, he said fission.
And safe and readily abundant.
Fission,
and low cost as well.
wasabi,
We
not
buy it in compressed gas cylinders. It's already purified, but you could imagine doing the purification
Lord
yourself.
Almighty.
It's pretty straightforward. The helium-3, however, is ultra rare. And in fact, while helium-3 was theorized in the early days of fusion as being the best fusion fuel, because of its rarity, there haven't been a lot of approaches that have used helium-3 or demonstrated helium-3. To our knowledge, Trenta was the first system we know about that did bulk deuterium helium-3 fusion for a power generation application. One thing helium has done is we patented a helium-3 process of creating helium-3, of taking two deuteriums found commonly in nature and at high pressure in a fusion system, ironically, fusing them together to form helium-3. Taking one more deuterium, fusing that with the helium-3 to make helium-4, and that's what makes electricity.
So it's only the reaction of the deuterium with helium-3 that generates the...
The deuterium generates some amount of electricity, a small amount. It generates about 1/8 of the deuterium helium-3
Someone start
reaction.
training Doom guy.
What influences that?
So it influences the amount of power output
rod.
per reaction is the actual atomic physics that's happening. Where when two deuteriums combine, they have a few reactions, but the one we care about most will create a helium-3. And that helium-3 will have a lower mass deficit, so the amount of missing mass of that final product. So E equals mc squared, and that mass deficit is the amount of energy that's released in terms of the particles that are created and their temperatures. And so deuterium helium-3 has a larger mass deficit when it forms helium-4, and so you end up with more energy trapped in that helium-4 as well as in the other proton that is made.
There's quite a lot to break down there. As David said, the energy released depends on the mass difference in the final reaction. But how we can capture that energy changes with the products that are created too. Two types of fusion can occur when fusing two deuterium atoms. One creates a helium-3 atom and a neutron. Most of the energy of that fusion event is carried away by that neutron. Tokamak reactors generate electricity by converting the kinetic energy of neutrons to heat in their walls. But Helion's energy capture system can't generate electricity with neutrons because they have no charge. Helion needs charged particles to push back against the magnetic confinement to generate electricity. That neutron just flies right through the magnetic jail. The helium-3, however, carries about 0.82 mega-electron volts of useful energy that the generator can capture. In a second possible reaction, deuteriums can create a proton and a tritium, with the proton carrying 3.2 mega-electron volts of energy and the tritium isotope carrying 1.01. Helion's generator will capture as much energy as possible from these particles before exhausting them through the turbomolecular pump in the diverter section, with the protons regaining an electron and becoming hydrogen, and the radioactive tritium being transferred to remote storage. Here, it will beta decay into helium-3, but this process takes 12.3 years to occur. When it finally does decay, that helium-3 can be fed back into our generator. So, Helion has two pathways to create helium-3 for their primary fusion energy reaction. When deuterium and helium-3 combine, they create a helium-4 atom and a proton, releasing 18.3 mega-electron volts, more than the 17.6 mega-electron volts released from deuterium and tritium reactions. And on a mass basis, 4 times more than a uranium fission reaction. Being able to generate your fuel right where you need it is a huge advantage, but David Kirtley had an interesting alternative.
It's a very good business case of you could do it that way, or you could do it where you have one dedicated facility and all it does is fuse deuterium and make fuel and then put it in a bottle, separate it from all the other gases, and then ship that to your generators and have the generators just make electricity and not deal with the fuel processing. I think that's a good, outstanding business decision that we don't know. One of the things that you have to keep in mind is when you do the deuterium fusion, that's when you make the neutrons. So the neutrons come from the deuterium fusing together. And so there's some really maybe advantageous things of separating those two machines.
One of those advantages is prolonging the life of our generator. The high-energy neutrons from the deuterium-deuterium reaction can damage our generator. This is a huge problem for tokamak generators because 80% of the energy in the deuterium-tritium reaction is carried by the neutron. But the neutron generated when two deuterium atoms fuse has 5 times less energy, reducing the damage it can do. However, they are still damaging. If we could design a cheaper, more robust reactor purely to create our fuel products, that could be economically beneficial, especially if there are multiple generators that all need fuel supplies. Replacing one fuel generator that can feed 10 energy generators is a lot cheaper than replacing 10 hybrid fuel and energy generators. So, there are many benefits from moving away from deuterium and tritium, but the deuterium and helium-3 reaction does require higher temperatures, and this does pose an engineering challenge, especially as Helion progresses to their commercial scale reactor.
So right now we're building Polaris, their 7th generation system. The goal is that it will demonstrate electricity production for the first time, come online in 2024. The stepping stone between our 7th generation system we're building Polaris and the 8th generation system is a lot of the engineering around the system, that we want to turn up the power output, the yield even further. We want to make sure we're taking that electricity that we're recharging capacitors with, turning that into 60 hertz AC and putting that on the grid, and then also repetition rate. That's a big one, is that going from operating every few seconds to now operating multiple times a second is another engineering leap we have to make in some of the thermal engineering, structural engineering, and gas handling systems.
What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge in making that jump?
I think if you ask any engineer or scientist on my team, you're actually going to hear a different answer for what is the hardest thing that we're trying to solve. My personal belief in building the steady operating systems that we built in the past is it comes into the thermal operation of these systems. Whereas things start to heat up, they change. The structural mechanics change of these pulsed magnets. The way the fusion plasma actually the wall temperature changes as it changes in temperature. We saw that on our earlier subscale systems, and so we expect to see that on the big scale systems too. And so understanding that, predicting that, and then engineering all the mechanisms in place for that, I think are going to be some of the most exciting engineering challenges that we're solving right now. And so we're hiring those teams to solve those problems right now.
Were there any surprising learning moments recently that you've discovered with Trenta?
There were some exciting things that we learned on Trenta that were unexpected. We were really worried early that the timing accuracies of merging these two high-speed plasmas over 1 million miles an hour, compressing them, working on getting their alignment, that would be really a tough challenge. And what we found that is, in practice, is actually quite a bit easier than the theory or the basic computation simulations would actually show. That we can, with a lot of essentially freedom, merge these and get really good results that are really repeatable. Some of the things we did find, however, that are a little bit more challenging is as these plasmas got hotter and we got above 10 million degrees and got to the 100 million degrees, what we found is that there's probably some other effects, good effects, where we're producing more fusion than we maybe predicted, but the fusion plasma interacts with the vacuum chamber a little bit more than what we thought as well. And so what we're having to do for future systems is build them just a little bit bigger, about 25% bigger than what we'd originally planned to account for those things. And so there's some engineering iteration that has to happen as we discover the advanced physics and the engineering of implementing these systems.
The advanced physics of fusion.
This is another one of the benefits of Helion's system. It's a much smaller generator than other generators like ITER's tokamak, which makes iteration far easier, as larger machines will be more expensive to build, making the capital cost of learning a much larger barrier. Polaris is their 7th generation system, and it's 25% bigger precisely because of the lessons learned from Trenta. The physics of fusion is a new frontier. There are few textbooks to learn from. Helion is helping write the first textbooks, and one of the things they discovered is that gyro orbits are larger than they expected. A gyro orbit is essentially the radius at which those fuel ions orbit around magnetic field lines. It's affected by the temperature and thus the speed of the ions and the magnetic field strength. Helion discovered with Trenta that these orbits are larger than simulations calculated, which meant the ions could impact the generator walls. And given their temperatures, this was a no-go.
Yeah.
So, Polaris is
When they're
25% larger
containing as
to
much heat
account
as they
for
are,
this discovery.
it's like, yeah, you can't
Polaris will
afford them
also
to
be the
touch
first
anything.
generation to begin
Because the
capturing
moment they
electricity.
touch something
But
with that
that's a
much
lot
heat,
easier said than done.
a
And
lot
we'll
of
need
heat's gonna
the
get
very
transferred
latest
over.
electronics to work quickly enough. Under Trenta, there are stacks upon stacks of capacitor banks. 90% of Trenta's power goes towards generating the huge currents needed to generate its magnetic fields. The magnets that form and push the plasma forward
I wish I
run
was
at
smart enough to
100,000
better understand
amps,
a lot of this stuff,
while
to
the
be
main
honest.
compression coils at the
I would
center of the
love
machine
to be able to get
run
into
at
this
1 million
and like
amps.
learn more and
Drawing
more and
that kind
actually
of
become
current from
quite
the grid
educated on
is
this
impossible.
subject.
So, Trenta
But
needs a
I
way
am
to store power
nowhere
locally
near
and discharge
clever
it
enough
quickly
for,
to achieve the necessary
for,
current. Batteries
nuclear
can't discharge
fusion
that quickly,
physicists.
so Helion is relying on capacitor banks. We took a
Stars
look
do this
beneath
process
Trenta to
24/7.
learn more
They do
about
this
them.
process
So what you're seeing here,
constantly
this is
on a
actually
scale
one
that
capacitor
we
unit.
hope
And so if you're
to
used to other electronics,
maybe be able to
a
replicate
capacitor-
a
Each of these boxes
fraction
is one
of.
unit.
Each of those boxes is
God
one capacitor that has
is
several
a
kilojoules worth of
very,
energy storage in
very
it.
clever
And then we have
individual.
hundreds of
We,
those
we
capacitors that all in parallel
We are
in a
simply trying
modular
to
way
learn
make
the
the main
system he
bank.
created.
In parallel to that are other capacitors that
And
are
we've
slower
barely
response,
scratched
higher
the surface.
efficiency. Those are run with semiconductor switches. And then even some capacitors that are very old, that are maybe 20 plus years old, that we use for
He
some
is
of the
a
formation
genius
sections,
in
some
all
of the
things.
injectors, the initial
We
ionization sections.
Are just children
Any issue with them
desperately
being
trying to
older?
figure
Is
out
that
their
just like
father's creation.
the length of time you've been working on this technology, you just had these lying about, or is it better to use newer?
It depends. So what we've seen is over the years, the way the pulse power technology and community has evolved, some of these capacitors are actually still the highest performing capacitors because the industry doesn't manufacture a lot of these for our type of application. Now, one thing you'll see later in our facility, Antari's facility in Everett, is our new capacitor manufacturing line where we're making custom capacitors designed for exactly this application. And those outperform even the older technology.
Is there any issue with just the rate that when you get up to faster pulses that these might deteriorate over time, or?
Yeah, so one of the keys to these systems is as you're running them, what we call repetition rate, where you're pulsing not once every 10 minutes like Trenta does, but where you're pulsing every 10 seconds or once a second or 10 times a second.
Smaller than
now,
a
the
lot of
lifetime of
stars,
the capacitors, their ability to handle throughput, average throughput, and the heating in the capacitor starts to become engineering issues that we have to consider. Luckily, as we've evolved, so has the capacitor technology, and so self-healing and other capacitors that have long life, maybe not pulse, but are long life, those capacitor technologies are now enabling for us to do this. On subscale systems, not on Trenta, but Trenta has done over 10,000 high-power pulses doing fusion. In some of our subscale systems that we did earlier, that they weren't doing fusion, but we're making these types of plasmas, we've done not tens of thousands, but we've done billions of discharges with capacitors and run them steady for months on end at hundreds of hertz. So we have a lot of experience in building steady operating pulse power systems that are quite a bit smaller than this. And so a lot of the work we have now is taking those experiences and that engineering experience that we have at Helion,
we will be able to conquer the
combining that with the large-scale pulse power fusion systems and merging those
two
together.
It's an inevitability mankind will spread out among
With the
stars
size
at
of this
that
capacitor bank, you would think it holds an astounding amount of energy.
Have to figure out
but
the one
total
thing.
capacity of the bank is just 10 million joules, the equivalent energy of about 22 bananas. Or, in terms of a typical Tesla battery pack, that's 2.8 kilowatt hours, 1/30th the capacity of a typical Tesla battery. However, we aren't expending that energy in an hour. We are releasing it in 100 microseconds. These capacitors release a lightning bolt of current through the machine, gigawatts of instantaneous power. But it isn't an uncontrolled burst of electricity like a lightning bolt. It's a carefully controlled orchestra of switches. Releasing and controlling this much electricity with a microsecond precision simply was not possible when the concept was first envisioned. Within those 100 microseconds, thousands of operations occur across the machine. Each row of electromagnets along the machine
look
need
how
to
much we
activate
have to do
300
just to
nanoseconds
mimic
after the previous.
a
They need to
fraction of the
trigger
power
just as the plasma
that a
passes
star
by,
produces.
traveling at millions of kilometers per
This
hour, push it even faster towards the center. That would be impossible without modern-day microprocessors and fiber optics.
And we're still
even
just
then,
out here
Helion needs to factor in the speed of light through the glass fibers, the time it takes for a current to propagate through a tiny semiconductor switch, and account for every other delay in the system. Legacy electronics simply have too wide margins of error to account for those delays properly. Without fiber optics, those millions of amps traveling through the system would induce currents in other parts of the machine and create misfires. What Helion is doing right now is astounding. The sequence of events to cause fusion in this machine is a delicate symphony of electronics, pushing two plasma rings into a violent collision and catching that collision in a magnetic trap in the center, which proceeds to shrink until the ions trapped within it have nowhere else to go but to fuse, overcoming one of the universe's strongest forces to create new elements in the belly of a man-made machine. But Helion isn't done. They are already building the next step in their quest for clean, safe energy for humankind with their 7th generation machine, which will do everything Trenta can do, but faster, and add another process, capturing the energy of the expanding plasma to generate electricity, adding even more complexity to the delicate symphony, with the energy flowing back and forth from capacitor banks like the tides on a shore.
But remember,
and
also,
hopefully,
Chad, remember,
if all goes according to
all
plan,
this,
each turning of the tides
it all just happened
will push
completely by
a
accident.
world-changing
It was a
electricity source onto our grids. I have never been particularly hopeful that nuclear fusion power was ever feasible.
That
But
all of this
speaking
just
with David
perfectly happened
and
to
all of
happen,
the talented
and
staff at Helion,
you're a crazy
and the
conspiracy
recent
theorist if you
news
believe
from the
otherwise.
US Department of Energy about their net energy output from their
It couldn't
inertial
have been
confinement reactor,
intelligently designed.
it
That's
has
why-
really made me feel that
that's
this
why,
technology may not just be
clearly
possible,
atheism is
but
correct.
potentially around
It's
the
like, okay,
corner.
Redditors.
We shot hours of footage at Helion, cutting it down into a cohesive
something
and
this
entertaining
complex,
YouTube video
just completely
meant that
by
a lot
accident.
of interesting information was left out. It would be a shame for those interviews to be stored on our internal servers, never seeing the light of day. So, I have made 2 of the longest interviews available to watch for our Nebula subscribers, which you can get access to
Will
with
never
an
not
even
be
lower
funny to
price
me.
due to our 42% holiday discount, giving you the Nebula and Curiosity Stream bundle deal for
One of those
just
things where it's like, yeah, there's a
$11.59
reason
for the
that
entire year,
nearly every
less than $1 a
single,
month for
like,
access for yourself,
extremely
or
well-known
you could buy
scientist
it as a
throughout human
gift
history
for the
ended up
holidays.
becoming a
The full
devout
uncut
Christian
tour
or
of
Catholic.
Trenta and our standing interview with David
As,
Kirtley
once you start
are both
learning
available
about the
on Nebula
universe
right now.
and
We are aiming to do many more
figuring out how
documentaries
everything
like
works,
this in 2023.
it's almost an
visiting
inevitability
companies
to come to the
working on
conclusion
radical
of, like,
new
no,
technologies and interviewing
no
their
way that this
engineers,
is all
and we
random.
simply would not have the budget
it
to fund a
could
production
not
like this
theoretically
without
have
Nebula.
happened.
Our spin launch documentary, which
Without an
occurred over multiple
intelligent
days
guiding
and in
hand.
2 different states, requiring gear rental, hotels, camera operators, editors, animators, and more, ended up costing around $30,000 to make. A price we simply could not afford without your support on Nebula. So, as thanks, we will be uploading behind-the-scenes footage that did not make the cut to Nebula for any shoots like this going forward, along with our original series like the Logistics of D-Day and the Battle of Britain.
This is the world's most challenging construction project.
Papenburg is a very little town in the northwestern part of Germany.
Another
It's
great
only just
example
above
of
30,000
why I always find it funny
inhabitants.
is you look into the, like, how much we've discovered about the human body and how
It is
is
very rural here.
insanely
you have fields,
complex.
and you have dikes,
and the
you have
fact
some
that
windmills, but there's really
quote
not much else.
unquote evolved
So
to just
it's
so have it to where
strange,
everything
isn't
works.
it? A small town
yet we
building
still
huge
can't
cruise ships.
replicate it. Like to build a robot that would be able to perfectly mimic a human is still so far beyond us. Like, we've got
the first time
ideas
that you see a
and
cruise
we've
ship
come a long
is
way.
akin to looking up at
but
the pyramids for the first
it's
time.
just,
Because
there's no way.
the scale of it is unbelievable.
Even just the mimicking
they're
our
1.2
physical
million square
capabilities
feet,
has
at least.
been, like, making robots that can do
They're
stuff
over
similar to
200
what
feet
humans
tall.
Can do, physically,
They're
has
more
already
than 2
been
football fields
a
long.
massive undertaking just to mimic it.
But a Disney cruise ship,
But
there's no other
to
cruise ship like
replicate how our mind works, we have
The Disney Wish is
not
the
even
first
begun
of its
to
kind,
scratch the
so it's a
surface on that.
first-in-class ship, never been done before.
We have
But
4
remember,
existing ships
it all just happened
that are
randomly,
extraordinary,
from nothing.
And we're
There
given
was a
this
big
task
explosion
of how
of
do you
nothing.
make it better?
It
Nothing
has less
exploded
emissions,
into
cleaner
everything.
burning. The level of technological
And
sophistication is
it was all chaos, and it just happened to work out perfectly. Obviously,
We've never done anything like this on
That's
any
a
of our
reasonable
existing Disney
conclusion
cruise
to make
ships.
that a person could come to.
Contingency plans on our way. It is unbelievable, like how big of a production this is. It's probably 0.01% of the overall cruise experience. It's just one night of dinner. That guy's still eating.
There are projections and lights, there's performer flying, there is pyrotechnics.
We have a lot of work ahead of us, and of course the pressure is enormous.
There is 100 million things that we have to do.
We have engineering, we have architecture, we have interiors.
The ship is like the ultimate design challenge. It has to be anti-flammable, it has to stand up in marine environments.
We have audio, ride design.
There's still a lot we need to do. Where's my waterproof notebooks?
We have show set, props.
No guest is ever going to get this close to her, but we want to make sure that she's exactly correct.
There is so much magic that we need to create.
The timeline is so demanding, but we have the most amazing team.
All right, where to next?
It'll be a race to the finish. We all have our running shoes and we're ready to go.
We are in the main building hall at the Meyer shipyard in Papenburg. We've come here, middle of the night, to really see one of the last blocks of the foreship, our Disney Wish, be lifted and mounted onto the foreship. Outside, we already have another piece of our ship being completed as well. A cruise ship is built in parts, so-called blocks. They are lifted and put together in a way like a Lego principle, and that's really what's happening at the moment. This block has a number 73. We are calling it the bridge block, or wheelhouse, is where the captain will navigate the ship. It is really heavy, up to 800 tons, so metric tons of weight. So if you think like a small car is about a ton, so that's 800 cars just there, hanging off of the crane. My name is Philipp Janot. I'm a naval architect, and I work for Walt Disney Imagineering, Germany. I make sure that we know where we are, what we're doing, and where we're going. I'm also a keen model builder, so I'm trying to keep up with the way the shipyard is actually doing the blocks in the right sequence. So I'm following the block plan here. A cruise ship is one of the most unique, most sophisticated, complex product out there. I have not found anything to date that integrates as much technology and different technologies as a cruise ship does.
That's because you didn't watch the episode we were just watching earlier, Buzz.
Sewage plant. We have the Walt Disney Theater in there, and on top, the entrance to the spa. The ship also creates its own fresh water.
With this one too. Now I'm
It
curious.
all starts with a white piece of paper. Concepts, ideas. Takes a good year and a half
That
before the
worries
first
me.
part of construction will even start.
Me
We will then actually cut the first piece of steel, and then off we go. The main engines go in. The LNG, the liquefied natural gas tanks, go in as well. all of the heavy components down below, and those steel sections get put together into blocks. The ship will be more than 60,000 tons. These are metric tons, so close to 130 million pounds, if I'm not mistaken. So the model is exactly the same size as what our ship is at the moment. It's not complete yet, but neither is my model. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yep. Okay, so it's got to be something with the computer. Glad I spent money on a new mouse.
So at the
I
moment,
didn't really have a spare that I could
bridge
test
block
it
is
against.
nearly in its
so-
final position.
Well,
They're adjusting for the last few millimeters. They're actually talking millimeters. So they're laser scanning all the time, making sure it really is perfect.
okay, I don't know how
And then
long
it
Shreve's
will be
gonna go,
welded
though.
up to be part of our Disney wish. And then the most important one for the foreship.
It's like your child
I may
growing
have
up.
to
When the ship
start
grows like
looking
that,
around
you
at,
can't wait for
my
it to grow
programs and
as
whatnot,
quickly as
see
possible.
if there's something that needs updating or what's going on.
Is a ship.
It's crazy, right? My career is all about cruise ships. And even though I've been
I
doing
am
this for
gonna try
many
this
years,
real quick.
every time it's very emotional. It's our design, it's our dreams, our creativity, all coming to life. Pretty awesome.
Swap the ports around for now, just as an easy,
Welcome
quick
to my
fix.
garage.
We'll see if
This
that works.
is my brain. This is where I have to make the magic happen. It's a pandemic. It's 2021. I think I've been working in this garage like everyone else for 15 months. When you're designing a ship where people are touching things and looking at things, you can't just do it through the computer. You need to be surrounded by it. I'm Laura Cabo, and I lead the creative development of the cruise ship. The task of designing and building cruise ships, aside from the pandemic, is a mind-blowing task. I'm an architect.
That's how you know this is a bit
by
older
training,
now.
And I didn't know anything about cruise ships, but I do know about design and I know about storytelling. So having that opportunity to be in charge of an amazing team that injects that into our cruise ships, that's incredible. As Imagineers on Disney Cruise Line, we just have endless number of spaces. And all of those spaces are telling stories. That was one of my mantras. Everything on the ship is inspired by something.
You want to actually work into the carpet,
Yeah,
right? It's
like the-
everything related to the story.
Gosh, it's just endless. We go all over the company for inspiration, and so we work very closely with ILM, which tells all of our Star Wars stories, with Marvel Studios, and with Walt Disney Animation. I think each ship carries about 5,000 pieces of artwork. So it's a floating gallery, too. There's no other place in the world you'll see that amount of Disney artwork.
We have about 65 million works of art in our collection, everything from Snow White to Encanto. And so we opened up our archives and selected a lot of wonderful pieces for various parts of the ship.
65 million assets. It's a lot of millions, right? And so that's a huge resource for us. You look at something so simple, this sketch of Bambi it's unfinished. It's the essence of Bambi. Or we were looking at a Mary Blair, and Mary Blair is like one of my absolute favorite Disney artists. And you could just see the brush stroke, it was so simple, and yet that captured Cinderella.
We have more art represented on this ship than we've ever had represented. We have over 1,000 pieces from our collection, which guests will be able to see in stairwells, in staterooms, certainly in the restaurant. It's pretty extensive.
Mark. Everyone's settling. Here we go. Ready and action.
America! Sam, South America. What do I call you now?
Sam works, so call me Cap. So how's the cushy cruise gig going?
Try the chicken tender. They'll change your life. What are you doing all the way out here?
We're headed back to base and we noticed a spike in high energy levels at your location. Red Wing, give us a bird's eye view.
We are in a soundstage in North Hollywood, California, where we are shooting our first scenes for Avengers Quantum Encounter, our brand new dinner show for the Worlds of Marvel restaurant.
Be honest, so far,
it is going to be a flurry of activity over the next few
but
days.
I also find Marvel
We're shooting
to be
Anthony
cringe
Mackie
in
as
general,
Captain America, and our stunt
which I know
double,
is not
Sabrina
popular.
as Miss
I know
Marvel.
that is not that popular in the
I'm Danny Hankey. I am a senior creative director for Walt Disney
couldn't be a
Imagineering,
popular
and
opinion
my job
with
is
how
to
much money
bring
that's
all these amazing
made.
Disney, Marvel,
Too many
Pixar,
people have
and
gone
Star
and
Wars
seen
stories
it
to
for
life
that to
on
be
board the
the
Disney
popular
Wish.
opinion.
She turns, I cut their slow-mo shot. So at Worlds of Marvel, we want to give something that's interactive and brings the action as close to you as possible. And so tonight you're invited to enjoy a Avengers technology showcase. You're learning about some cool quantum technology and enjoying a great meal.
Not
Things go a
learning
little wrong.
anything.
We might
You're
encounter a
learning about
normal-sized
fake
seagull
stuff
at a very
for a fake
small-sized ship. But all that
superhero
cool quantum
series.
tech, of course, attracts Ultron, and that's where we call in the Avengers to kind of save our ship.
Watch my six! Hang tight! Contingency plans on our way.
We've never done anything like this on any of our existing Disney cruise ships.
What is it?
We've never done like a big Hollywood-style production.
You're an Avenger now.
And it's like, well,
in training.
If we're going to do a Marvel restaurant, let's just go big with it, right?
Let's see, page 2, he was destroyed 6 years ago. And he's looking for a new power source. Smiley face.
We're taking these characters and putting them on our cruise ship, which is so cool, right? To stage our final battle on board the ship. They're there with us.
Continue to survey the ship around you, but obviously your eye line, you're talking to camera.
Got it.
And it gives us a way to have fun with like all the tropes of being on a Disney cruise.
He must be here for the quantum cores.
Yeah.
Well, he isn't here for the chicken tenders.
I love it. I can't wait to hear him deliver that. That will just make my day.
Okay.
He might be here for the quantum cores.
Well, he isn't here for the chicken tenders. And we're gonna have a serious talk about you bringing quantum tech on a cruise ship.
I had no inkling the amount of people it would take to pull this off. We have people working on this in London, in Germany, in Florida, in California. We have to get into visual effects.
All these people all over the world,
the
and
media.
it produces rich.
We have to create the quantum cores. We have to fit out the interior. We have to pick the
Chunky,
linens
not
and
paying
the
attention.
chairs.
It's-
You know, there's
it's so
so much
sad.
left to do. It is unbelievable, like how big of a production this is, and it's just one night of dinner. It's probably 0.01% of the overall cruise experience. That's just mind-bending. It's very ambitious, but we're gonna pull it off, and guests are gonna love it.
Well done.
that's
You
not
left
what I
some chicken tenders in your.
Those better be the best chicken tenders.
That is unfortunate for it to work that way, but okay. You'd now noticed, after I was fiddling with stuff,
This is one of our many guest
My
staterooms
goodness.
going on to our Disney Wish. This is an amazing process. The shipyard builds prefabricated staterooms off-site in their factory, brings them over here, and they're being installed in the ship. That's a very important piece of the entire puzzle. There are more than 1,000 staterooms. Every 15 minutes, they're installing a cabin on our ship.
It's amazing to see this conveyor belt. You
There
don't
we
actually
go.
see it moving because it's so slow, but every component as it goes down the line, you have people working from different directions. One's doing plumbing, one's doing millwork, one's doing the electrical.
Then as we get further down the line, they'll be installing wardrobes, cabinets,
Oh, we finally got the
carpet,
platform
TVs,
area
all
built.
that will be in the cabin
You were in
by
another
the time
tab.
it goes on board the ship. I mean, this whole process
believe
is
it.
incredibly innovative, when this cabin first started on the line to where it'll end now is about a 12-hour process. So from 12 hours, start to finish, you have a complete cabin.
The total number of cabins we have, crew and guests, is about approximately 2,000, and we have about 900 of them so far. There's still a ways to go, but a good percentage is already complete.
Yeah, so
It's
this
done.
is where I'm
So
hearing it
nobody
from.
can make changes.
Oh, this is it. Fully finished. We've got the sofa bed, the bed frame, the mattress.
So I don't
once
want
the
to
carpet
build
is
down
rolled
here,
out
but I'm going to build down
they
here
can
just
lock up the
with
cabin,
the hope that
done.
it will prevent that thing from spawning anymore.
It is a really exciting moment. A lot of our team members from the US have not been able to come out here for more than a year because of the pandemic. So many hundreds of virtual meetings, virtual drawing approvals, virtual factory acceptance tests. Come on in, come on in.
You set your foot into this space, and we want you to be in awe.
Hoping by sealing this area
is
up.
so beautiful. With that sweep, it's so elegant.
We're gonna start walking.
That by
As I'm
sealing it up
touring
will
the ship,
hopefully prevent
I'm seeing everything
anything
that's
else
coming.
from spawning.
Amazing things that are going to come to life in a matter of months.
We've got the main galley for the entertainment restaurant. We only really have the start of the entrance to it.
But then up in the ceiling, we have something like the main area that we can do open house here. Oh God! This is a new feature allowing the guests to be able to come out onto the bow of the ship. Okay, we're in the bridge. All right, we're not stepping on any cables. We want them all to work.
Keep going, all the way up. Everyone catch their breath.
Oh my God, you get into good shape here. I'm exhausted. My legs are killing me, but there is a ship. I mean, it's not put together yet, but that's where Imagineering comes in here.
I want a team picture.
Taking this steel and putting an experience into it. Everyone say Disney Wish.
So the good thing about construction is it would be stressful if you had any time to stop and think about it. We have no time to stop and think about it. That's actually the reality. I'm Claire Weiss. I'm a creative director here for the Disney Wish. I really focus on the spaces that are inspired by a film or inspired by a character. So we're right here in the Walt Disney Theater. It's amazing because 2 weeks ago there wasn't a roof on this, and
Hopefully,
now there's a roof.
like I said, that
There's
will
an
prevent
incredible
any
amount
additional
of steel
spawning.
that has to hold this up because this isn't just one deck.
This
sort
is
of
going to
steps
be our
down
train
between
station,
three
I
decks.
think. This raised area is where we're going to build it.
Our entertainment partners, they wanted a theater that uses new technology. So that can be projection mapped and you can change it with color and lighting and projection. So this was all 3D modeled down to the last detail and shape and light fixture and speaker. This just looks like a normal piece of green fabric. This was almost a 2-year development process for this color and this weave. Now they're buying and sourcing these materials from all over the world, the stones, the fabrics, the metals. And before we know it, I'll be sitting there with a glass of wine, maybe 2 glasses of wine, a bucket of popcorn, watching what's on that stage. I mean, we have a theater with a roof. All right, let's do a show.
This is a big moment for us. We're standing on the foreship, our Disney Wish, and the middle part of our ship is going to come in the next few moments.
There's a skyscraper floating towards another skyscraper. It's crazy.
And those two humongous pieces have to be joined at an accuracy of a few millimeters. We did it. Another milestone. It's 4:30 in the morning in Papenburg, Germany. It's the last block to go on for our Disney Wish. It's on its way over very, very gently. Yes, of course, it's middle of the night, but oh, that's fine, right? I need to be here.
We have a lot of work ahead of us, and of course the pressure is enormous.
But once the blocks are all welded together, we won't mention blocks anymore.
We're going to be talking decks, we're going to be talking spaces, restaurants, cafes, cinemas. So yes, of course, I'm nervous in a way, but I'm really confident we're going to get it done.
Let's think this thing
Actually,
really,
I like
really
the look
through,
of that.
because we are going into the last and final 7 months, and we just gotta make sure we keep spirits really, really, really high. Because people are getting tired, like everywhere else in the world, right, from the pandemic.
Maybe 80% of the spaces are really good, but then maybe the most critical spaces where we have the most show and coordination, entertainment, maybe those are, their trend is actually continuing to grow. I don't know. I'm just saying.
No, absolutely, absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, really, these ships sitting out of port, not coming into the port, and we can't get hold of our materials.
Having just been to the shipyard a couple of weeks ago, I stood in front of this majestic bow and seeing every little detail of that ship. It just made me realize the resilience of the human spirit during what was a rather challenging period in constructing and building a ship.
Since we're now, a few months out, pressure's on. She's going to be floating out of the hull soon.
Let's remember that spirit, because it's gonna get, if we think it was busy the last 18 months, it's gonna get a lot worse in the next 7, right?
Yeah, that's so true.
I am a little nervous just because it looks like this one may have tipped in transit, and so just gonna kind of wait and see what she looks like when we open it up. But hopefully we're all okay. I can see hair, lots of hair. I'm Alyssa Markford. I'm a show manager with Walt Disney Imagineering, and we are here today to start the installation of the Rapunzel Stern character for the Disney Wish. Rapunzel is the largest Stern character that we've done to date. She's 27 feet wide. She herself is about 9 feet tall. She has a size 22 women's shoe. She is very intricate and very big, and it's been a really cool undertaking. All looks really, really good. Some dust and some dirt, but nothing that's out of the ordinary.
Only Disney has Stern characters. They take a good year and a half, 2 years of design, working with our partners at animation.
So literally we started by just drawing sketches to go, what's the right pose? Because we wanted that spirit of joy and enthusiasm.
Rapunzel with her bare feet, a little bit of a painterly mess.
So she's using her hair as this crazy sling. And so it's an incredible collaboration with the structural engineers to make sure that the character feels spontaneous, even though literally years of work going to figure out how to make it absolutely rock solid.
I was just curious how it's going up there.
So far, so good. Bolts are lining up.
We start the installation from left to right, starting with the piece of hair that goes down, and then we go the swag, the next swag of hair, the next swag of hair. So now we're about to lift Rapunzel herself. Really tricky because she has about 5 attachment points, which makes it a little bit complex with the compound curves of the ship and making sure that everything aligns correctly.
We need to get in more there too.
Rapunzel has a wish for bigger things in her world, so she is the perfect icon for our ship.
It's my favorite part of my job is to make these magical things and see them come to life.
Cool, cool. Looking good.
We are standing in the conveyor belt, our first scene of the Aqua Mouse. This is crazy how just thinking this too, it's much bigger than I expected, right guys?
It's amazing because we've been talking about this for a couple of years now and dreaming up possibilities. And now we're standing in the conveyor. The screens are coming together, starting to look like we're in an actual Mickey and Minnie experience.
No, it's magic!
Totally worth it!
I find inspiration everywhere. Just have to immerse yourself in everything. My daughter, of course, is my biggest inspiration.
Just like Walt did with his daughters, we do like Daddy's Day at the Disney park. And we ride Small World all the time.
During the pandemic, all of us had our own unique set of challenges. And for us, we had this added layer of our daughter getting an autism diagnosis.
Getting to see the world through her eyes just opens up so many new possibilities that I've never considered before.
And
Things that
plastic,
I'd be
we'll
more
go get
cognizant
some
about.
industrial beams.
It's cool to kind of see how she processes things. And it kind of reminds us, like, not all people think the same way, and so we have to consider a lot of different points of view.
We want to make sure everyone feels welcome to our ships, that there's something for everybody.
The Aquamouse is a story of Mickey and Minnie. In our very first scene, you're climbing 45 feet all the way to the top. You're either the Swiss Alps or you're going on an underwater excursion to look for the mermaids. Each day of the cruise, we alternate between different stories. So when you get all the way to the top, the final scene of the story, we hit you with these giant water blasters. And then we go down into this amazing slide experience. Once we are dust free, then we can start turning on the water, then we start programming and making it into an attraction. We're going to have a ton of work to make sure that everything is okay. So the propellers, the stabilizer, the thrusters are ready to go underwater, because that might be the last opportunity we have to see these components for a long time.
In this pod, there is a large electric motor that's directly connected to the main propeller blades.
It's a naval architect's dream to be able to design the hull for a pod. For the energy efficiency of the ship, for the speed of the ship, it's really the most optimal flow to the propeller. So this is it. This is the last time we see her dry for 5 years. 5 years. Right? Not gonna work. You're fine. You're back. Finally, she's afloat.
It's unbelievable. It's so special. Suddenly you see it's growing, and then you're asking yourself, how could it be in the hull? Because the ship seems to be bigger than the hull.
This is it. She leaves the hull and she will never come back into the hull.
3-4 hours driving. We all wanted to be here to say hello to the gorgeous Disney Wish.
This is sort of her birth.
Happy birthday, Disney Wish!
Well, I was hoping for more of a documentary on the design of this ship and less a propaganda piece, which is what this kind of feels like, to be entirely honest. Yeah, we're just gonna skip the rest of that because
this 50-mile
that
long
isn't so
stretch
much
of
a
water
documentary
Panama
on
has been a
on the
top
ship.
choice for companies moving billions of dollars of goods around the world. But it's not as reliable as it once was. Say you're in charge of shipping 10,000 containers from Shanghai to New York in the most efficient way possible. Your go-to route, the Panama Canal, has raised toll prices by nearly 8 times and restricted the number and size of ships that can pass through it. That's because water levels are at an all-time low. You could reroute via Cape Horn down here, which would add nearly 8,000 miles to your journey, costing you time and money. But what if you could cut through this little stretch of land right here? Enter Mexico's $7.5 billion interoceanic corridor. Stretching 188 miles across the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, this railway aims to ease a major chokehold in what has become a global shipping mess. But it's not clear whether Mexico's alternative is going to be faster or cheaper. This is Mexico's plan to grab a slice of the multi-trillion-dollar global shipping industry. Now, this isn't actually Mexico's first attempt to take advantage of its strategic location. The Interoceanic Railway originally opened back in 1907 to move goods like Hawaiian sugar from the Pacific to the US East Coast. But it was essentially abandoned for trade a few years later after the country's railways began to be used by armed forces in the Mexican Revolution. And a few years after that, the Panama Canal opened, offering an alternative and much more attractive route for American businesses. So, a lot of people may be wondering, what makes it viable now?
There are lots of things that have changed since the beginning of the 20th century.
Today, reviving the railway is part of a bigger plan by the Mexican government to spread wealth across the country. You see, the new corridor runs through the southern states of Veracruz and Oaxaca, where around half of people live in
This is one of those things I fully
The
expect.
Interoceanic Railway will carry both passengers and cargo
One of two
across 10
outcomes
stops
for
between
this
ports in
project.
the Atlantic and Pacific.
$7.5 billion.
The hope is that the line will
I reckon
eventually link
it'll
up to
either
Tren Maya, which will connect to the
get
tourist
done
destination Cancun
several years
once it's
behind
complete.
schedule. And
There are also plans
at
to build 10 new
minimum
industrial
probably twice the
complexes along
cost.
the route to take advantage of its proximity
Or
to
I
the
reckon
trade
that this
corridor.
project
Think
will never
car
get
part
done.
factories
I
or
do not think
agricultural
that
plants.
the Mexican
But
government
all
is
of that
strong
takes
enough or
money and
organized
buy-in
enough to
from
pull
the
this
rest
off.
of the supply chain.
Mexico needs to
we will
convince
see.
investors of the attractiveness and the economic viability of these kind of projects and reshoring.
So far, the project has received about $6 billion in funding from the Mexican government, and more than $2 billion in financing from international sources, including the World Bank. Now, supply chains are incredibly complex, but for this video, we're going to simplify the practice down to its building blocks: time, money, and shipping containers. If you're a shipping company, the more containers you move means the more money you'll be able to make. Which is why the Panama Canal would probably be your first choice, because you can move a lot of containers in one trip. Over time, ships have been redesigned to take advantage of every square inch of real estate this canal has to offer. When shipping companies couldn't stack any more containers through this narrow stretch of water, they built even bigger new Panamax ships. And in 2016, Panama actually widened the canal locks by 70 feet. But now, some of those ships can't actually pass through the canal as often as before. You may have to wait more than 2 weeks out at sea, or bid millions of dollars just to get ahead in line. That's because there's been a historic drought in Panama, which is leaving water levels at the nearby Lake Gatun at record lows. That's a problem, because the Panama Canal relies on the water from that lake to operate the lock system that moves ships through the canal, and that means shipping companies are losing time and money. That's where Mexico's Interoceanic Corridor could come in. Say you reroute to the port of Salina Cruz on the Pacific. You can then transfer your goods to the railway and pick them back up with a ship on the other end. In theory, it sounds great, but in reality, Mexico still has a lot of work to do to get its ports ready for an influx in traffic.
Mexico might have a very good opportunity here to put itself as a key player on this map of international maritime shipping.
But it's not clear whether Mexico's railway will actually be faster than the Panama Canal, which is about 50 miles long, while the railway is around 200. It takes about 8 to 10 hours to sail through the Panama Canal, while it could take 6 to 7 on the railway. But when you add in the time it takes to load and unload thousands of shipping containers off a ship, onto a train, and back onto another ship, it's more like 15 hours to pass through Mexico. But recent waiting times at the Panama Canal have caused delays of up to 2 weeks, as they try to preserve the amount of water that's displaced by heavy ships. So it's not clear exactly who wins out on speed right now. And then there's the question of capacity.
Even within a few years from now, after the project has been completed, it's not going to reach even half of the capacity that the Panama Canal allows the shipping companies to transit through the canal.
A company involved with the development of Mexico's corridor says it'll handle up to 5% of the global trade passing through the Panama Canal. But it's not just the railway that needs an upgrade. The ports still need to be modernized because they aren't actually capable of handling that many new freight shipments right now. So this corridor isn't exactly a replacement, but it could be a promising plan B.
This can be a very interesting case whether Mexico and Panama are actually going to collaborate in the future on the long term, and perhaps they can share data, they can reroute the vessels when there is a choke point, whether it is in the Panama Canal or in Mexico.
The Panama Canal.
Some of them are doing on a dang old human man, boy. I tell you what, I get a goddamn superhuman, innovative, animated dang old rubber, so that anything says Ricky saying back at you, man. Devastating more than ever, demonstrating how to get a dang old audience to feeling like a steady day. Faded like a farmer's tan, man. I tell you what, here's getting worked up, complain hot like propane, boom, how spitting them facts, man, spinning them rhymes like a dang old tornado, jib jabbing like it just ain't no thing. Why be a god and not a dang old
The
king?
U.S. government and businesses have been trying to loosen ties with China by moving operations closer to home through a tactic called nearshoring.
So nearshoring or backshoring is when businesses relocate their supply chain processes back home or in a near country. Mexico is benefiting from its proximity to the US as a bordering country.
Those involved with the project say all those new industrial plants Mexico wants to build could be used to make goods, like the semiconductors used in everything from cars to smartphones and computers.
In general, Mexico is ambitious and trying to play a role in the semiconductor nearshoring, so bringing back all the semiconductor chips to be closer to the US and be manufactured and processed in Mexico.
Now, all of
I
this
literally
represents
just did this.
potentially billions of dollars in trade and toll revenue from Mexico.
This gives a lot of influence to the country. Soft power, basically.
The Panama Canal Authority is expecting to bring in $5.6 billion in revenue this fiscal year. Even a slice of that is a lot of money. An Oxford Business Group report projects the corridor and the surrounding developments could boost Mexico's current GDP by 3 to 5% once it's operational. But not everyone in Mexico is set to benefit equally. Indigenous communities have said dozens of families along the railway are being forcibly relocated, and that the construction poses a threat to the environment.
People should care about
There's
this
always
project because it really relates
we're
to
not
how supply
all
chains
equally
relate
making
to
money
our
off
daily
this thing that
lives.
we
When
didn't
we
spend
place an
money on.
online order or when we pay for a product that we buy in a shop, it is our money that finances the entire supply chain, probably also partially finances these infrastructure projects.
In late 2023, both freight and passenger service began on the first section of the railway.
There's always
but there's still
someone with
more
their
work to
hand
be
out
done to
asking
upgrade
for
the
something.
entire railway and ports. As for whether it will take on Panama,
I don't really look at this project in terms of a rivalry between Mexico and Panama. I really think about this project in terms of what we call co-opetition. I think it could be more beneficial for the global supply chain networks to actually use both capacities of these two routes to ensure that there is a
I shouldn't
seamless
have
flow
deleted
between
these.
the
I forgot
Pacific
because
and
this
the
open
Atlantic
area
Ocean.
spawns animals. Dang it.
This bridge should not have been possible.
Come on, YouTube.
Canada is the world's fourth largest oil producer, but 98% of its crude is shipped to the US. But for the first time ever, this 733-mile pipeline expansion is finally bringing Canadian oil to new buyers across the ocean.
It basically changes the game for the entire industry here.
But critics argue that investments into a stalling oil industry hamstring the Canadian economy. Canada's boom could also be a bust for the American refiners who have grown used to that cheap, plentiful oil.
Come on, game.
Here's what's at stake for the astronomically over-budget Trans Mountain pipeline expansion and what it could mean for Canada's global ambitions and the world's energy markets.
I guess that means I need materials anyway.
The oil and gas industry represents about 5% of Canada's GDP. The energy sector is one of the only industries in Canada that is growing.
I think we'll finish
95% of the country's oil is produced here in Western Canada. It's home to Alberta's oil sands, where producers pump out millions of barrels of thick, tar-like oil every day. But most of that oil ends up just across the border, mainly in the Midwest, instead of other global markets.
For a long time, Canada was happy to send its oil to the U.S. It's a huge market that has insatiable demand for energy.
That created a relationship where each country relied on the other. Nearly all of Canada's oil is exported to its neighbor, and that oil makes up 60% of U.S. imports. Pipeline advocates say that the heavy reliance on a single market helped push down Canadian crude prices for years.
Right now, most of the world's increasing demand is going to come from Asia. Canada's been trying to get its oil to those markets for a long time.
The problem? Alberta is here in the middle of the country and hundreds of miles away from either coast. The original Trans Mountain Pipeline, first built in 1953, was the only pipeline bringing oil from Alberta to the West Coast. So in 2013, energy company Kinder Morgan filed an application to expand its capacity. At the time, it was estimated to cost almost $4 billion. But the project stalled for years, facing intense opposition from environmental and indigenous groups, as well as mounting costs. In 2018, the Canadian government stepped in to finish it, buying the pipeline from Kinder Morgan. The project is ambitious, aiming to open up exports to new markets in Japan, China, and India by transporting more oil to a newly expanded Westridge Marine Terminal near Vancouver. It included almost 120 miles of reactivated pipeline, 19 new storage tanks, and 3 new shipping berths, all to triple the pipeline's capacity to ship nearly 900,000 barrels a day. In the end, it cost the government $25 billion to build, more than 6 times the original estimate.
That's always a big mistake. When the private sector says, hey, this is too risky a project, circumstances have changed, we don't think we want to build this, the government, the taxpayer, should not come along and say, okay, we'll build it instead.
Thomas Gunton has analyzed the costs and benefits of projects like the expansion for decades. He estimates that taxpayers are subsidizing the cost of the project up to $14.9 billion. A spokesperson for the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance said in a statement that the expansion will ensure Canada receives fair market value for its resources, adding that the Bank of Canada estimates that it will contribute 0.25% to Canada's GDP. The project promised big returns for Canada, making up $2.7 billion in lost revenue every year thanks to higher prices on the oil, and an additional $34.5 billion in tax revenue.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion is a vital strategic interest to Canada. It will
I don't know how he always manages to
After
sound
12
so
years
gay
of development
anytime
and
that man is
construction,
talking.
the expansion opened at 70% capacity
You could be
in
talking
May,
about anything. He
but
will make it
gains may
sound
not be
as
as high as
effeminate and
expected.
gay as possible.
The
and I don't
idea
understand.
that you were going to get higher prices, in part, was driven by the fact that this was going to be a low-cost pipeline with relatively lower cost tolls than other pipelines, and therefore, even if the price was the same, you get a higher price because the transportation costs were lower. Well, that's turned out not to be the case because they significantly underestimated the costs.
The expansion also promised to alleviate another problem Canada's growing oil sector faced, a strain on the country's export infrastructure as production increased. Now, with 600,000 barrels of increased capacity a day on the expanded pipeline, oil producers are shipping their product directly to markets including China and India. But that's been a blow to the American refiners who have been used to abundant access to discounted Canadian oil.
In June, Phillips 66, for example, one of the big refiners with a lot of refineries in the West Coast and the Gulf, said that their margins have been squeezed a little bit because all of a sudden
Armor, welcome
have
in.
less access to Canadian oil than
Chalky,
they used to.
could you
In a
give
comment,
Armor a
Phillips
shout-out
66 said that it had great flexibility in its
How you
system
doing
that
today?
can move oil into its refineries at the right time. And the shift could send ripple effects to consumers in the Midwest. Some experts expect refiners to pass higher crude costs along to customers at the pump. Better oil prices and more customers outside of the U.S. also mean a bigger
yes, we were talking about
geopolitical
Justin
role for
Trudeau.
Canada.
Canada's access to the global market
You're
also
surviving,
gives the country
fair
a
enough.
little bit more
Sometimes
clout
it's all you
globally
can
than
ask
it
for,
ever
huh?
had before. Now all of a sudden Canada does have
I'm good,
some
other
position
than
and
I'm
some
curious as to what's
ability
causing my
to
mouse problem.
kind of sway markets when they can.
But the expansion isn't guaranteed to wean Canada off the U.S. entirely, thanks to its geographic isolation.
The U.S. will always be its number one customer. The easiest way out of this quandary would be for Canada to build more pipelines to its coast. But the prospect of another pipeline being built in Canada is unlikely.
That's partly because of heavy opposition from environmental and First Nation groups. Trudeau, whose approval rating has slipped, came under fire for his support of the pipeline expansion at the same time as he pushed to fight climate change.
Canada wants to be a climate leader and has implemented a number of policies and made international commitments to reduce by 40 to 45% its greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050.
Now, the biggest contributor to emissions is, of course, the oil and gas sector in this country.
The greenhouse gas emissions from all of the increased oil production and transportation will make it impossible for Canada to meet its climate objectives.
It's also a major risk for Canada's geopolitical standing, at least under Justin Trudeau, because so much of the country's foreign policy has been geared towards reducing the threat of climate change.
But as growth of demand for oil slows around the world amidst a clean energy transition, critics warn of the long-term prospects of the pipeline expansion.
So the world is moving away from oil. How fast it's going to move away is up for discussion, but it's definitely moving away.
Hold on, now I'm curious.
And
this is from Wall Street Journal only 5 months ago. Okay, so they're coping and seething.
Fill up the pipeline.
If this was from 2 years ago, I could understand it.
For now, though, Canada is hoping that there will always be some demand for the 170 billion barrels of crude in Alberta's oil sands, particularly in developing areas of the world. And projections show that despite growth decreasing, oil demand itself will rise by the end of the decade.
Take the example of coal. People have been expecting coal to be phased out as people reduce the use of coal for producing power and whatnot. The world is using more coal right now than it ever has in history. The sense is that it'll be the same for oil.
This is one of the biggest energy megaprojects in North America, but you've probably never heard of it. That's because it's a type of infrastructure that doesn't get as much attention as power plants or dams, despite being equally hard to build and just as crucial to the world's power supply. With the global energy crisis showing no signs of stopping, gas prices stuck at record highs, and shortages made worse by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, ensuring there's enough of the stuff to go around has become a bit of a challenge. But when this enormous new facility in Canada completes in a few years, it could provide a much-needed new source of fuel that'll reach far and wide, as well as providing a huge economic boost.
The single largest private sector investment in the history of Canada.
But in an industry where competition between countries is fiercer than ever, and with renewables on the rise, is this Canada's chance to become the next energy superpower? Or has it missed the boat? Okay, so let's get right to it. What exactly is this mega project, and why does it require digging up such a huge chunk of this stunning landscape? Well, it's all taking place in the small town of Kitimat, and the consortium behind it goes by the name of LNG Canada. LNG stands for liquefied natural gas. And yes, we know what you're thinking. And yes, you're right. Fossil fuels are bad, and Canada is supposedly a world leader in renewable energy. So why is it building something like this? Well, Canada is one of the world's biggest producers of natural gas, but unlike the US, Qatar or Australia, it doesn't have any way of exporting it overseas.
The gas industry, of course, sees a huge amount of gas underground in a place called the Montney Basin, sort of northeastern British Columbia, and they're thinking we need to get this stuff to market. We need to be able to make some money from this. But the problem is that there's not a big population center nearby. They need to get it somewhere else.
Hence why Canada is now building its first LNG scheme, set to cost more than 40 billion Canadian dollars in total. A task that, as these pictures clearly show, is more than a little bit complicated. But hang on a moment, let's take a step back before we go any further. Isn't natural gas a gas, think it would be not a liquid? Yes, it'll still be a gas when it comes into this new terminal via the Coastal Gas Link, a new 670-kilometre pipeline that runs all the way from the source up in Dawson Creek.
But power production is not something you want to do on a localized
Yes, that is the name of the town where the gas comes from. But if you want to send gas to another country or continent, there's an ocean in the way, and it's too far to simply build another pipeline. You'll need special tankers like these. To make it safe for transport, and so you can fit as much of it as possible on board, the gas has to be converted into a liquid. Then it's placed in these huge tanks and shipped over before it's turned back into a gas at the other end. It sounds simple when you summarise it like that, but the actual process is far from straightforward, and the same goes for the construction. Now, you'll be pleased to know that we're not going to try and explain what every single component on this site does and how it's being built, because that will clearly take some time. So instead, we're going to pick out a few highlights. Firstly, what are those things that look like huge cages covered in pipes? They're the process modules. 35 meters tall and weighing over 4,500 tons, this one was the first to be installed. Its job is to act as the entry point for gas coming in from the pipeline and to send it on to be treated and processed. These giant structures were all manufactured in China and carried over on ships. To get them from the port to the site, they had to be placed on the back of large transporters and carefully moved by road before being lowered onto specially built foundations. It wasn't a one-off task either. In total, more than a dozen of these modules are going in. Next, there's the absorber column. It's used to remove carbon dioxide from the gas before it's liquefied.
Like I said,
weighing over 800 tons and measuring 54 meters long, it's the largest single piece of equipment at the site, requiring several hours and 3 cranes to install. But the one thing you really can't help but notice when looking down from above is this: the massive tank where the gas is stored before it's piped onto those ships. 52 meters high and 92 meters in diameter, the colossal container is one of the biggest of its kind in the world, with a domed roof that had to be lifted into place very slowly. The lift was done using fans, which gradually pressurised the tank and raised the roof over 3 hours. Once in position, welders fixed it into place, and the air pressure inside could return to normal. With construction now over 70% complete, the terminal is set to come online sometime in the middle of this decade. And as for where all this gas is likely to go, well, Asia is the main target. It's the next closest continent to Canada's west coast. Many countries here are dependent on gas that has to be imported, and others are still burning coal, the worst of all fossil fuels. Yes, natural gas is a fossil fuel too, but it's not as bad as coal, so technically it is a lower carbon form of energy. But is it really going to get countries like China to stop using coal?
China is still importing large amounts of LNG, but they're still building coal plants. They don't necessarily use it for electricity. It's often used for domestic consumption, or it's used for powering industry. So as far as getting off coal, well, that may be one of the possibilities that may happen, or it could just be that China, places like China, will import LNG and still burn their domestic coal because coal is cheaper.
So what about Europe, which has had to scramble over the past year to fill the gap in its gas supplies left behind by Russia and its war on Ukraine?
Europe's energy crisis, one that could tilt not just the continent, but the entire world into a possible recession.
According to Shell, one of the 5 companies behind LNG Canada, 2022 saw LNG imports to Europe increase by 60%. Surely then, one of the world's biggest gas producers suddenly becoming an exporter is good news for Europeans. Well, first off, they're in the opposite direction to Asia, which would mean very long journeys to reach them. Also, despite needing more of it in the short term, Europe is pushing hard to get off fossil fuels for good as soon as possible. And right there, you have one of the potential problems with this whole project: the timing. When it finally gets up and running, many nations are going to be looking at much cleaner alternatives to natural gas, and the chances are that overall demand will be lower by then. Canada will also be coming up against competitors that have already been doing LNG for years. Another issue is the cost, which has grown significantly, not on the LNG terminal, but with that pipeline. There's also the impacts on local communities, the First Nations. LNG Canada says it's working closely with them on the main sites, but there have been disagreements further inland.
Coastal GasLink pipeline was originally estimated to cost about around $6 billion. The latest cost estimate is $14 billion. These are Canadian dollars. And then at the same time, First Nations, the Aboriginal people of the Montney Basin, have been concerned about the impacts of drilling and forestry on their hunting and fishing rights.
The industry had to make an agreement with the government and the First Nations that limited the amount of drilling in the basin, and that could push up the cost of supply as well. All in all, LNG Canada represents something of a gamble for the companies involved, and to some extent the country. It's undeniably impressive from a construction point of view, and it's offering something that's clearly needed at the moment all over the world.
Like the Czech Republic, maybe.
But as is often the case with these mega projects, whether it ends up being worth the costs, both financially and environmentally, remains to be seen. This video was sponsored by Bluebeam. You can learn more about how their digital construction tools are helping amazing teams around the world at the link below. There's also the chance to dive deeper on this and the other topics on our channel over on the World's Best Construction Podcasts, available now wherever you get your podcasts. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.
Skovda. Oh dear. We'll have to come up with a name for this. With a good, proper American name and an American industrial name.
Right now, there's a construction boom taking place in one of the most unlikely parts of the world. Antarctica. The coldest, windiest, driest, and somehow wettest continent in the world. It is, without a doubt, the harshest environment known to man. Temperatures can drop to a grisly minus 89 degrees Celsius. Wind speeds can exceed 200 miles an hour, and during winter, parts of the continent can be submerged in 6 months of darkness. To travel here, to live here, you have to be brave. There's no question about that.
We will also build
and yet,
the train
surprisingly,
itself,
the continent has a population of about 5,000 people in the summer and around 1,000 in the winter. There are actually towns with bars and shops, and even little cinemas. There is life here. And it's growing. Construction is reaching an all-time high across the continent. Right now, these settlements are mostly populated by scientists doing extraordinary work. But that might be about to change. You see, in early 2024, Russian geologists found what looks to be like massive reserves of oil. The reserves uncovered contain around 511 billion barrels worth of oil.
Holy cow.
That equates to around 10 times the North Sea's entire output over the last 50 years, and more than twice that of all of Saudi Arabia. It's a discovery that has put this icy continent on edge. Since 1961, the countries laying claim to Antarctica have peacefully agreed to preserve the land for scientific research. This treaty dictates that no military bases or oil operations can take place here. But that agreement is set to expire by 2048, and we're already seeing some of those countries attempt to secure their claims through settlements, construction projects, and even babies. So, are we about to see a scramble for the last continent? Our story begins with Nazis. During World War II, Germany sent expeditions to Antarctica in attempts to establish a secret military base there. As you can imagine, Britain and America soon followed suit. Now, there are a number of colourful conspiracy theories on the internet as to what all these operations were up to. What we do know is that in 1958, America detonated 3 nuclear weapons in the region. It kind of became obvious that Antarctica could be used as a pawn in the growing Cold War. To prevent this, the 12 countries that lay claim to the continent agreed to a treaty, and it's more or less stayed the same way ever since, with each country claiming its own little slice. There are now 7 countries that want a piece of the pie: Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the UK, while America has its own research base. Now, it should be noted that while the treaty is recognised internationally, these claims are not, and they remain contested. This slice over here, you may notice, has a few countries laying claim. Argentina, the UK and Chile have all marked this spot as their own. And as these things tend to go, this is where the oil's been discovered, but we'll get to that in a moment. To build anything in Antarctica takes an enormous strength of will. This is an environment that really doesn't want us there. And yet, the architects and engineers who work down here to construct new buildings are busier than ever.
I have been working on projects in Antarctica for 20 years. I've been twice with the British program, once with the Spanish program, twice with the New Zealand program, and once with the Australian program. There was another big building spree in like the late 80s and 90s, and we're experiencing the same again now.
For the last few years, the British Antarctic Survey has been undergoing a massive effort to update their existing infrastructure. While you and I might wonder who in their right mind would want to spend 3 to 15 months at a time down here, Antarctica is full of scientists doing just that, and they're achieving some remarkable things.
I remember seeing the first iceberg on our first voyage and the excitement that sent through the whole ship. And then approaching the station and being on the peninsula was just a fantastic experience, and I'm looking forward to going back again.
Scientists here are the ones that discovered the hole in the ozone layer. They are continually learning about the rapid effects of climate change.
Obviously, Antarctica is like a kind of thermometer on the world, and a lot of the key signs of climate change are witnessed in the Antarctic.
And of course, they study the penguins.
Penguins.
It's enough to make you forget the potential nation-building amount of wealth that could be at stake under the ice. Enough to create a new generation of billionaires who will no doubt look for places to invest and grow that money. A 2024 Bank of America study found that 83% of young wealthy investors currently own art for investment purposes or would like to. The UK scene has just completed the Discovery building, a $372 million fit-out that replaces a number of older buildings on the site.
It's intended to replace 6 of the existing buildings, which are coming to the end of their life. They've been there since about the 1970s, 1980s.
It becomes challenging in extreme weather walking between the buildings. So the Discovery building replaces all of those with one big, much larger structure, and it just makes the whole experience more collaborative.
This is the UK's largest research station on Antarctica and includes a scientific workshop, a medical centre, operations hub, and even a gym with a climbing wall. But the Discovery building didn't actually begin its journey in Antarctica. It was first built on the other side of the world, in T-Sports. There's really no room for error when it comes to building in this location. If you're missing a piece, you can't simply go around the corner to your local hardware shop. Every piece of material and equipment has to be painstakingly checked and then carefully shipped to Antarctica.
So it's quite a challenge to get all of the materials that we need to Antarctica. So that planning prior to going down to station and making sure we've got everything we need and some spares to go along with it is so important.
It's why nearly all of the buildings there are prefabricated. Think of them like IKEA flat packs. This means that buildings can be constructed and tested in the UK before they get shipped over. You see, everything's initially built here. It's then trialled, improved on, broken down, before being put on an enormous container ship and sent halfway around the world. Now, to get to Rothera, where the British base is, these ships have to cross the dreaded Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean is easily the most dangerous in the world. This is because it's the only ocean that goes completely around the globe uninterrupted by land. It creates a swirling mass of water with winds that can reach up to 70 knots, causing the largest waves on the planet. Hitting an iceberg in that weather is catastrophic, and because of its climate and location, icebergs can form here at any time of the year. All of that accumulates over here in the Drake Passage between South America's Cape Horn and the South Shetland Islands. In some areas, water currents flow as fast as 150 million cubic metres a second, making it the most voluminous, dangerous current in the world. Once the ships finally dock at Rothera, workers only have 6 months to assemble the buildings. There's literally no time for mistakes or delays. Beyond April, the amount of daylight reduces dramatically and temperatures drop regularly below freezing. The sea ice then begins to form and no new ships can come to the station. Meanwhile, all flights already stopped going out by about mid-March. At this point, it's almost impossible for anyone to get to or leave this continent.
Rothera Research Station is on an island. Sea ice forms around it that we can't traverse through.
The buildings themselves, of course, have got to withstand extreme weather conditions. Temperatures can drop very suddenly, often landing at minus 35 degrees Celsius. Snowfall can often exceed the depth of a single story, while wind speeds can reach 38 metres a second with gusts of up to 45 metres a second. It's no surprise then that retaining heat is the primary focus of these structures. The external cladding of the Discovery building, for example, has to include thermal breaks and vibration dampers.
We then look at systems to make sure that they can be as airtight as possible, so panels pull hard against each other, but with really good compressible seals within to make sure that there's no path for the cold to get into the building.
Many of the buildings in Antarctica are also divided into zones and have sensors detecting when people are there. Rooms that are empty are then winterized and have their heat shut off or lowered to conserve energy. There are also ventilation systems that recover heat from warm, dirty air.
So during the summer, we'll have in excess of 160 people on station, but during the winter, that'll go down to about 25. You don't want to be heating areas that are not in use.
There's still some really talented people maintaining the buildings. You generally have a generator mechanic, probably a plumber, an electrician, maybe even a builder. But if something significant goes wrong, you need to be able to survive, and it could be for many months until you're rescued. So that's why in most of these stations, it's still important that there is more than one building, because essentially you need one to be your lifeboat. That resilience underpins all of the design in Antarctica.
To fight the wind, the Discovery building is secured to the ground with 71 anchors. It's also orientated in an east-west axis to maximise the scour from the predominant northeasterly winds. These winds are then deflected along the curved steel of the southern roof down to the sheltered side of the building, where they actually help to clear snow. It joins a number of other settlements across the continent, the biggest of which is America's McMurdo Station, situated on the Hut Point Peninsula of Ross Island in the Ross Sea. This complex has more than 80 buildings housing some 1,200 people. It really is like a small town with shops and bars. And there's camaraderie between the various bases. Kiwis from the New Zealand Scott base frequently make the trip to the US base to watch movies and join book clubs.
The Antarctic community is a great community, and everyone does interact between stations and shares a lot of their knowledge and experience.
Now, when news of Russia's discovery of oil hit, Chile alerted its defence forces and held a security meeting at its base in Antarctica. Chile, along with Argentina, have been steadily building up their bases on the continent over the last few decades as well. To shore up their claims to this piece of land, 11 babies have been born in Antarctica between both countries, the first back in 1978.
The White Continent
Mining of any kind is banned in Antarctica under the Environmental Protocol, but like the treaty, that is up for review in 2048. Regardless, we are definitely seeing a boom in construction across the continent.
The boom in construction is orchestrated by a number of factors. The first one is that there is a sort of 40-year cycle on buildings. Buildings just don't last as long as they would in a more temperate environment. There's obviously also an element of geopolitical interest in Antarctica, and we're seeing a lot of new nations developing stations at the moment alongside those that have been there for the last 70 or 80 years. The Antarctic Treaty, which protects Antarctica and to which all the nations that operate in the Antarctica are signatories to. And that ensures peaceful activity, it ensures a focus on science. But, you know, the world changes, people have different interests, there have been some challenging sessions, and certainly all the countries that we work with are very aware of that. Geopolitics has probably always been there. I think it's a little bit more heightened at the moment.
I'm trying to think of
certainly all the countries that we work with are very aware
English
of that.
Or German.
While Antarctica may seem like a desolate wasteland to most of us, the continent's actually been inhabited for centuries. Antarctica is a beautiful sanctuary for this wildlife, and it deserves to be protected. We all know what can happen when countries begin vying for oil, and it's clear we need to tread really carefully when it comes to the last continent.
Every time you go, it's totally magic. And that first time when you step off the plane or step off the ship, you just look around in awe because it's just such a majestic environment. I think one of the things I've always admired about Antarctica is the collaborative spirit of all the people who work there. And there have been countries that have been either at war with each other, but in Antarctica they've continued to support each other, helped when someone's been sick, helped with a rescue. You see the best of humankind in Antarctica. Now, will that continue? I mean, who can know? If it does continue, and it provides a fantastic focal point for the rest of the world to understand how people can get on in the face of extremity if they really want to.
The coming decades may very well see even more construction projects take place as the 7 countries that want Antarctica race to secure their claim. Whoever wins, this continent is certain to change forever. This video was brought to you by Masterworks. You can learn more about that at the link in the description. Don't forget that we're raising awareness of construction's mental health crisis and supporting charities in this space through our Get Construction Talking initiative. There's a video series on our channel, and you can find support or donate over at getconstructiontalking.org. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.
Seriously, not enough space. That's kind of annoying. I didn't know I could just hop into my train. Name it Bahnhof. Why should I name it Bahnhof, Chonky?
This construction project is truly out of this world. In the middle of a desert, and on top of a mountain, the largest optical telescope on Earth is being assembled. It's almost the height of Big Ben, and when complete, it'll produce images of faraway planets that are 15 times sharper than NASA's Hubble Space Telescope.
This telescope will open the window towards part of our universe that today we don't even imagine.
That is not sufficient.
An incredible 16 nations have come together to build something that would otherwise have been impossible. But how do you construct an extremely large telescope in one of the most remote locations on Earth? And how much will this really advance our understanding of the universe?
You've let me down.
A final frontier.
You named something like a train station after people.
Stretching for around
not
1,000 kilometers along the Pacific coast of South America is Chile's Atacama Desert.
If you find a good
it's the driest place on Earth outside of Antarctica. There are volcanoes, salt flats, and a whole lot of dust. Features that kind of make it look like a scene from an alien planet. In fact, this is where the European Space Agency likes to test its Mars rovers. And it's here, 3,000 meters above sea level and 150 kilometers from the nearest city, that you'll find the site of an extraordinary project, one that's going to give humanity a better view of other worlds than we've ever had before. On this very spot, ESO, the European Southern Observatory, is building what they've cleverly called the Extremely Large Telescope, or ELT for short. Even with construction far from finished, you can easily see how it got that name.
Okay.
Because
my
it's extremely large,
no one mentioned
it needs to be to have enough space for the enormous mirror
unaware.
inside it.
I had turned it down earlier,
meters long, it's 4 times bigger than ones found in the current largest telescopes of this kind. And it's actually just one of 5 mirrors that make up the whole thing, allowing it to gather 100 million times more light than the human eye. Without getting too technical, we're going to explain to you how that works a little bit later on. To give all of this high-tech kit protection from the elements, everything is being contained inside a giant steel dome covered in insulated cladding and weighing over 6,000 tons. Fitted with 2 enormous sliding doors that close during the day, the dome is 80 metres high and 93 metres in diameter. Underneath, 36 trolleys are attached to the circular concrete pier that the telescope sits on. They're what lets it turn by 360 degrees. So, how on earth did construction teams even begin to build something this complex?
I was like, I recognize the name Hipper, but
hours away from any civilization. Well, before they could do any work at all, ESO had to find the perfect site.
I'm talking important
Spain,
individuals
Morocco,
in the world
and
of trains.
So, why here?
The very important and fundamental aspect was a location that could allow the fulfillment.
If we have enough train stations where we run out of like important names for people that were involved
Roberto Tamai is
in
program
trains,
manager for
then
the
we will
ELT
consider
project
people
at ESO.
that were
It's one of the
industrialists
leading
or businessmen,
intergovernmental organisations in
stuff like
astronomy
that
with
later.
16 member states.
But a train
According
station
to
ought to be
Roberto,
named
there were
after
many
a
factors
great
involved in the
individual
decision to pick
involved
this
in
particular
trains.
mountain.
The turbulence, the
Seems only
content of water vapor, the content
On your way
of
to
wind,
Costco, I see you.
rain.
There's a
Think
Costco
about
here, but it's
constructing
a
such
bit far
big
away.
telescope in a location where 50% of
Trying
the
to get
time
Chunky to get
you
a
need
job
to
at
keep
the
door
Sam's Club
closed
so
because
we can
it's
go,
raining.
go
Other
shop
things to
there.
consider included ground
close.
conditions, altitude, whether there's any light pollution, and how clear and dark the skies are. The Atacama Desert ticked all the boxes. In 2010, after many months of testing and analysing data from various sites, they agreed on a location. The peak of the Cerro Amazonas mountain. But there was a problem. Mountains tend to be a bit pointy, and the telescope needed a flat, level surface to build on. The solution? Cut the top off. To enable construction to start, the summit was flattened in 2014.
That's why I don't
that was done
understand
by
why they
drilling
won't
big
add,
holes, filling them with explosives, and lighting the fuse.
But they won't add terraforming to this game.
Then the rubble was swept away,
Like a whole
and
game
a road
about
was put in so vehicles
industrialization
could
and
actually
building
reach the
mega
site.
projects
and yet,
and stuff
that
like
was
that,
just
and
the
yet
start of the preparations,
I
and the
can't terraform
problems
the
were
planet
only
at all.
just starting to emerge.
They just built it, no gas stations, 5 minutes away. 5 minutes away is like the Sam's Club for me, but it's a good drive to go get to the Costco. There's only one around here, so it's unfortunate, but like at least we've got Sam's Club nearby, you know?
Partly because
Not
of
quite
this,
as good
it
as
wasn't
Costco,
until 2019 that the foundations and the outline of the structure began to take shape. But the material of the surface was not the only issue. This is one of the world's most seismically active regions. In footage from 2022, one critical element of the design can be seen emerging from the dust. To stop the many fragile parts being damaged in an earthquake, the ELT rests on a concrete base that's separated from the ground. In that gap in between, isolators have been fitted which absorb lateral and vertical forces in the event of a quake.
Well,
Now,
and
before we
Chunky,
continue
I'm
with the
cool if
construction,
they're
I want
not
to ask you a
American,
question.
German,
Have you ever
or
gazed up at the
English
stars
as
and
well.
longed
Like,
for a career in
the
astronomy,
Japanese, I
thinking
know,
it was
have
light years
a
away?
lot
Well,
of
that
involvement
might
with
not be
trains
true.
as well.
If you're looking to shoot for the moon and learn the skills required,
But
then
it's
this
just
week's video
finding
sponsor,
people
Brilliant,
that are
has everything
important
under the
enough
sun.
to be
Brilliant
worthy of
helps build
having
critical
a,
thinking skills
especially
through
our
problem solving,
main
not
one.
memorizing. It offers
Thomas the
thousands of
Transit
interactive
Remnant, I'm gonna
lessons
beat
in
you.
subjects like mathematics, data analysis,
gonna
programming,
beat you,
and
bro.
AI. But math is what you really
Get
need
outta
if you want a job studying the cosmos. Luckily, Brilliant has a range of courses for learners of all levels, from the fundamentals to more advanced concepts. And what's even better is you can learn on the go. Whether you're taking
look
on a
at
new
that.
topic or doing a quick refresh,
Our first
you can level up
train.
in minutes if you
And our
press for
first
time.
train
To try
station.
everything Brilliant has to offer for free
Now
for
we
a
just
full
need
30
a good
days,
name.
visit brilliant.org/the B1M, scan the QR code on screen now, or click the link in the description. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Now, let's
Glover
get back to that
Station.
mountain in the desert. By 2023, it was time to start work on the Epic Dome. A structure made of steel segments weighing as much as 70 tons each. To get these massive chunks of metal up the
who
mountain, they
is
started off
Glover?
as individual steel beams that were then joined together
Is it
at
someone
a base
worthy
camp
of
nearby.
the main train
Next, they were put on
station?
the back of these remote-controlled transporters, which carried them up to the summit. There, the cranes took
Thomas
over,
Blake
assembling the
Glover,
exterior like
Scotch
some kind of
merchant,
massive Lego
demonstrated
set.
locomotive iron
As for
due to
how these
giant
massive bits of
Chinese
steel got to this
government to
area in
build
the
Tokyo
first
to
place,
Yokohama.
well, a lot of the infrastructure was already in place. You see, just over 20 kilometres away from here is one of ESO's other stargazing sites, the Very Large Telescope, or VLT. Before that was built, the roads, utilities, and everything else you need to run a science facility had to be constructed first. That meant that when they came to build the ELT, all they had to do was extend those routes.
Train
It still
station,
wasn't
Glover
easy, but it was a
Station.
whole lot simpler than building it all from scratch. Now, at this point, we know what you're thinking.
There.
They've already built the
That's a
Very
good
Large
one.
Telescope,
That's a
and
good
the
one. I'll take
Extremely
that.
Large Telescope is now under construction. Surely
someone
it's only
that
a matter of
caused
time
the-
before the
the design
ridiculously
of
massive
the-
telescope,
I just
Telescope
noticed the
Endgame, or
locomotive
something
is
like that
backwards
comes
for some
along.
reason, but
While there's obviously a chance that a bigger one could be built at some point, right now the ELT is as large as things can get. And that's all to do with the mirrors. 39 metres is about as big as it's possible to go while remaining cost effective. And ESO knows all about that. They already tried to make one with a 100 metre mirror, but it had to be cancelled because it was too complex and too expensive. And we kid you not, it was called the Overwhelmingly Large Telescope. No, seriously, that's what they were calling it.
What's funny about
Overwhelmingly Large Telescope?
Well, it's a joke name, sir.
Anyway, back to the Extremely Large Telescope, and we're still in 2023. The year the project
Crawford
officially reached
could
the
also be a
halfway
good
point.
one. That we can
As
name
well as
that
the
one
framework for the dome,
as the one at the oil
support
station.
cell, a large lattice structure that will eventually hold the
Because
main
we will
mirror,
have to build a
began
rail
coming
out to
together
there
in
as
sight.
well.
Like everything else with this project, it's absolutely massive. That right there is a person standing on just one tiny part of it. So now's probably a good time to swing back and talk about those mirrors, which are nothing like the kind we all use on a daily basis.
For now, yeah, this one will be Glover Station. I am open to changing station names if better proposals are come up with.
To make the telescope
but for now, I think Glover is a
M1,
good one.
the main mirror, is the biggest of the lot
that
and
will
consists of almost 800 hexagonal segments.
And that
Its
gets
job
us our
is to
first
gather the light from
operational train
space
station.
and then reflect it up onto the second mirror.
Means we
M2,
will have to
hanging
build
above
like
it. Light is
several
then
more
sent
of them,
down to
but
M3 before it goes
I'm
back
not going
up
to worry
M4.
about building one at
This
the
mirror can correct
primary base
distortions
yet,
caused by
because the primary
atmospheric
base isn't going to be the
turbulence,
primary
and it does
base
that
much
by
longer.
activating a set of powerful lasers.
Begin.
Because that one needs a large.
These are fired into the
remodel.
sky to make artificial guide stars for the telescope to see. They allow the ELT to measure blurring in the
I know one other
atmosphere,
thing
which
we
can
can
then
do
be
before we wrap
corrected
it.
by this mirror. That's called active optics, and it's already in use on the VLT. Now, if you're still with us at this point, then thank you and well done. After it's passed through M4, the light is directed through to M5. Here is where the image is stabilised before it reaches the various instruments for processing. But enough about mirrors. Now it's time for the really big question. What is ESO hoping to achieve with this device? Well, in short, it's something incredible. ELT will be the only telescope capable of taking direct images of rocky exoplanets outside our solar system, ones that might be able to sustain life. Right now, we're only able to see them indirectly, when a planet passes in front of a star, for example.
We will be able to understand if the atmosphere around those planets allows the life as we know it. So there will be chlorophyll, there will be water, CO, CO2, pollution, if there is anybody that is making pollution as we are doing on our Earth. So it will be extremely powerful.
Such a large light collecting area will also enable the telescope to look much deeper into the universe and help discover more about its origins. It'll help unpack the mysteries of dark matter and dark energy. One important thing to point out is that while the ELT will be huge, it won't be the biggest telescope overall. If you've seen GoldenEye, then you'll know that radio telescopes, which have a dish instead of mirrors, can be a lot larger. But they're different. Instead of visible light, they detect radio waves. In other words, they listen, whereas optical telescopes observe. Plus, the optical ones look a lot cooler and they have lasers in them, for goodness sake.
Lasers are becoming more and more a part of our daily lives.
So, final question, how much is all this costing and who's paying for it? Well, the total is expected to come in around $1.6 billion US. The funding has come from those 16 member states which have made various contributions depending on their size.
Those member states are the government that are putting the money.
Yeah, man,
in the
cooperate
organization.
here, dang it.
And therefore, there are member states that are putting more money because they are bigger, and member states that are putting less money because they are smaller. No single member state alone would have never been capable of putting so much funding, so much money for a scientific project.
Splitting the bill like this doesn't just make sense financially. Those countries are also all going to benefit from the results of this project. After all, the discoveries that the ELT will make when it completes at the end of this decade could affect all of us. For centuries, we've been wondering whether we're truly alone in the universe. This might just give us the answer we've been waiting for. The extremely large telescope is an astronomical construction project in every sense. The scale is extraordinary, the location is breathtaking, and the scientific, technological and logistical challenges required to make it happen are simply astounding. When you consider the job it's going to be doing when it completes, there's no denying that this particular mega build really is in a world of its own. This video was sponsored by Brilliant. You can learn more about that at the link below. Don't forget that we're raising awareness of construction's mental health crisis and supporting charities in this space through our Get Construction Talking initiative. You can learn more, find links to support, or make a donation over at getconstructiontalking.org. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed
to BLM. That brings us one step closer to having this facility fully spun up. Like, this is going to become our new primary base. Largely due to how much larger it is and the fact that it is much closer to the oil plant, and the oil plant is our primary power source. Or at least it will be once everything's connected.
Hello 2025.
Okay, then,
2024 was a massive year for construction. We saw record-breaking skyscrapers, hollowed out mountains, and even Arctic airports. But the next 12 months is shaping up.
Alright. My goodness. Well, chat, it has been good fun. Let me take care of myself. I appreciate everyone being here. I hope that you've enjoyed yourselves. A little bit of a shorter stream today, but tease what it tease, I suppose, you know. So, we shall be back again soon. We'll be back tomorrow for some We Were Here Forever. So we'll see you all then, but until then, you have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless y'all, and stick around. I'm going to find someone for us to raid real quick. But, farewell.
I don't know how to pronounce that. You cease.
Don't want to. I'm quite amused. You shut your mouth.
You too. Somebody clip his laugh, please.
No.
Right, you? Clip the
I'm like laugh crying over here. Tower Simulator is a very relaxing game, in my opinion. The sounds of washing are very white noise-like. Agreed. Also,